Nelson, and Diane Stefani. Also joining us tonight is our administrative team, including Superintendent Dr. Dane Deli, Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, Dr. Matt Silverman, Assistant Superintendent for Business Services, Eric Miller, Executive Director of Human Resources, Dr. Heather Hopkins, Executive Director of Student Services, Mary Garrity, Executive Director for Instructional Innovation, Brian Engel, and Director of Communications and Strategic Planning, Kathy Kajigian. Before we proceed, I want to give a quick preview of our meeting tonight. After taking care of some routine board business, we will hear from Dr. Deli and our administrative team. The board will then have an opportunity for discussion and comments, after which we will be taking a vote on our fall learning plan and where we will begin our school year. We know that many people are tuning in tonight, keenly interested in the outcome of our vote. We will try to make it through the agenda clearly and efficiently, but I do anticipate a considerable amount of time will be spent on board discussion before we take our vote. Having said that, let's proceed with our meeting. The first item on our agenda is approvals. We have two items for consideration tonight. The first is the approval of tonight's agenda. Board, may I have a motion and second to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Oh, second, Jim Baumsberg.
This is a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Next, we need a motion and a second to approve the July 12th executive session and regular board meeting minutes. May I have a motion?
So moved, Mike Corman.
Second, Diane Stefani.
Thank you. Again, this is a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. We now come to the communications portion of our agenda. I will ask Dr. Deli, do you have any comments at this time? I see Dr. Deli is having a little bit of difficulty connecting to our audio tonight. So you know what? I know that he will have something to say later on in our meeting. So we will proceed with our meeting. Because this is the communication portion of our agenda, I did want to take a moment to acknowledge the unprecedented number of letters the board received since our last meeting. Thank you to everyone who took the time to communicate with us. Please know that the board did indeed read every letter, and an overwhelming majority of them acknowledged that the decision before us tonight is a very difficult one. I see that as a reflection of the grace that we are all trying to extend to one another at this time, and we thank you for that. I also want to thank Kathy Kajigian for staying on top of all of the letters that came our way and for facilitating communications during this time in general. So thank you, Kathy. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Hats off to you. Now we are at the first of two opportunities for audience comments. Anyone wishing to address the board can access a Google Doc on our website. Kathy will be reading all submitted comments. The board will be taking note of all comments, but we will be in listening mode only. An appropriate response will be provided in a timely manner. And one last note. We ask that anybody who would like to register a comment do so one time per opportunity given. So Kathy, are there any comments at this time?
Yes, there are comments at this time, and I will read them. We will start with Kathy Carter, a District 34 staff member. Dear D34 board members, good evening. I am Kathy Carter, a teacher for 20 years in D34 and currently a third grade teacher at Glen Grove School. I am also a member of the GEA Executive Board and serve as the GEA Teacher Welfare Chair. I want to thank you for your careful consideration as to how we are to safely begin the school year during this time of a worldwide pandemic. Nothing more than to be back at Glen Grove, meeting my new third grade students and experiencing the joy of seeing my former students. The beginning of the school year is a teacher's favorite time of year, and I am no exception. This year, however, is like no other year. This year has been the most terrifying and sad year I have ever experienced. Besides the ordinary trials life brings, the drive-by funeral for my husband's friend, a COVID-19 victim, another COVID-19 funeral for an elderly family member via Zoom, not being able to hold my infant grandson for months while we were locked down, not being able to hug my elderly mother, several family members being tested for COVID-19, and much more has been both painful and heartbreaking. This year hard on everyone. Lost jobs, lost celebrations, lost hugs, lost vacations, lost plans, and so much more. We have all been forced to give up so much. Why would D34 step into the school year with the knowledge that we will lose more? The statistics in the US are against us. The cases in Illinois continue to be over 1,000 each day. We are not ready. My hope and prayers are that you will opt for a remote start. Never in all of my years as an educator have we been better positioned to deliver instruction as effectively as we are now remotely. Our district is solvent and has the cash available to provide for those who may need additional assistance in their remote teaching and learning. We're in the midst of a global pandemic, and our country is on record with the most infections and deaths, and they continue to rise. Just today, the Miami Marlins have had at least 14 COVID-19 cases in recent days, forcing the team to cancel their home opener. I ask that you allow that to sink in. A multi-billion-dollar sport on limited resources and nearly daily testing is not able to avoid the virus. Additionally, they spend a significant amount of time outdoors. Where does that put our schools, our children, our staff, our teachers? At the last board meeting, it was stated that the impact the virus has on children is not as profoundly negative as it is on adults. However, over the last 2 weeks, I have heard medical and science experts state that uncertainty is what we face. 1 week ago, 85 infants tested positive for COVID in Texas. I must ask, where will our students be without teachers and staff? Teachers all know more than most that socialization is important for healthy children. However, if we are to be back in the buildings, socialization that we would all currently recognize will be non-existent. If we wait, we will again see the joy and smiling faces inside our buildings without fear of illness or death. Again, I sincerely thank you for accepting comments and questions as you deliberate this enormous decision. My hope and prayers are that you will opt for a remote start. May you, your family, and friends remain safe and healthy. Kathy Carter. Next, we have Katie Beck, a D34 staff member. Good evening, District 34 Board of Education. My name is Katie Beck, 5th grade teacher, GEA Vice President, and IEA Region Representative. I have been a part of District 34 for 25 years and teaching for 32. When I was hired 25 plus years ago, Glenview School District 34 guaranteed I would receive fair compensation to work here. They guaranteed I would receive good benefits for me and my family. They guaranteed I would be able to have a voice in the decisions related to children. They guaranteed I would receive and participate in the professional development that put Glenview School District 34 as one of the top schools in the surrounding area. They guaranteed I would receive the support and mentoring needed to help me grow and develop as a leader and professional in the district. They guaranteed that my ability to put children first would always be honored. All of this is true for me and many of my colleagues hired before and after me. This list could go on, given my 25 plus years here. The guarantees my colleagues and I have received in this district are what made us become the well-respected leaders and professionals we are today. Those guarantees are what made my colleagues and I want to stay and become veteran teachers in the district. Those guarantees are what makes us continue to be part of the education our community of students need and deserve. My point is, everything you have ever guaranteed to me, other teachers, and students in School District 34 is what has given us the trust and ability to successfully move forward in our work here, because you make us believe in you. During these current unprecedented times, I know you cannot guarantee 100% of my or my colleagues and students' safety from COVID-19 with in-person learning. I know you cannot guarantee that we will not contract this virus and be okay with in-person learning. I know, however, that you can guarantee our safety and health with remote learning. We are hoping you will not let us, our students, or our colleagues down by not providing us with those things we have become accustomed to as the guarantee in School District 34. We are hoping that a beginning of the year decision for remote learning at the time will be the guarantee we need during these uncertain times to ensure the safety and health of all persons involved in District 34. I'm deeply appreciative of everyone's dedicated time and unending effort since March. Thank you for listening and allowing me to communicate my thoughts. Next, Merle Shine, resident and staff member. My name is Merle Shine. I have a long association with District 34, having lived in Glenview for 30 years. We have sent 4 children through the district, and I have been teaching in the district for 20 years. I would first like to thank you and our administration for all of your hard work and the additional hours that you have spent in your efforts to make the best possible decision for reopening school. This is an impossible challenge that none of us could have ever expected to face. District 34 has always been known for its innovative spirit and collaborative culture. While there is not one solution that will address everyone's needs and interests, it is my expectation that you will consider the health and safety of the students, the staff, and the community above all else when you vote tonight. I believe that starting the school year with a remote plus option is the best plan to accomplish this objective. There is nothing I would like more than for children to be in time as we were prior to the March shutdown. Unfortunately, we are now living a different world and no institutions look as they did in March. The news is broadcast from the homes of news anchors, downtown business districts are closed, and professional sports schedules are returning without fans in the stands. It's impossible for schools to reopen with full classroom attendance in the way that we all agree is best for children. It is our responsibility to make the best decisions for the health, safety, and emotional security of our students. We are learning more about the behavior of this virus daily and have seen many organizations reopen only to again have to shut down. Our students have already sustained the sadness of the shutdown of school in March. Opening schools and then subsequently closing will simply amplify students' anxiety. Until the numbers associated with the virus are showing a strong trend downward, the most responsible thing we can do for our students and our community is to return to school with a remote plus option, continue to monitor the virus, and plan our return to school slowly when science tells us it's safe. Thank you again for all your time and thoughtful work. Next is Susan P. Clark, a staff member. Dear D34 school board members, my name is Susan Clark. I'm a 4th grade teacher at Hoffman School, and I also serve as the secretary of the Glenview Education Association. Thank you for the time you took over the past 2 weeks to thoughtfully review and consider the feedback, questions, and concerns of the District 34 staff and community. The decision you are faced with this evening is important, and we recognize that all of you have spent many hours away from your own families to prepare for this meeting. Thank you. The start of the school year has always been an exciting time for teachers. We prepare for a new group of students, communicate with families, set up our classrooms, and reunite with our colleagues. We love our students and we love teaching. We want nothing more than to return to our classrooms and begin the school year. However, this year is one like no other. Our world, nation, state, and community is faced with a health crisis. In the classroom, we put the health and safety of our students and staff ahead of everything else each and every day. In a world where schools face the possibility of a dangerous situation, we prepare ourselves with drills and protocols to keep the children and teachers healthy and safe. That is our top priority. We now face another time when health and safety need to be our top priority. We are committing an outstanding education to each D34 student. We ask that you put the health and safety of the students, staff, and families at the forefront of your decision and approve a remote start for the 2020-2021 school year. When it's to do so, we will happily welcome the return of every D34 student to their classroom door. Thank you, Susan Clark, 4th grade teacher, Hoffman School, GEA secretary. And we have Lauren Bauerschmidt, parent of current D34 students. My rising 6th grade son was excited about the new STEM program called Project Lead the Way that was to begin at Springman this year. Our older daughter participates in the STEM program at GBS, also Project Lead the Way, and we were looking forward to having that learning experience in middle school. Whether it is via the goal, remote plus, or hybrid, how will the STEM program be implemented this year? The Project Lead the Way site has all distance learning support. I feel it is worth exploring how to incorporate this curriculum into middle school learning, and she provides the link. Thank you. Next, we have Naomi and Colin Bailey, both staff members. First and foremost, we want to take a moment to thank you all for the tireless work and energy that you continually put into the work and vision of District 34. We are sure that oftentimes it feels like your work is unnoticed. It is not. What you do is appreciated, and especially now, not something we would want to do. You have tough decisions to make, and the weight of the world is on your shoulders. Thank you for bearing this load. Second, we hope that you and all of your family have remained well throughout. We have been very close to multiple families who have been impacted by COVID and wish this on no one. It is a tough disease that comes with so many variables, and you never know which variable will interact with the way your body processes the illness. What we don't know is that with our friends that have had it, what we do know is that with our friends who have had it, it takes about a month for it to cycle through all members of a family, and another couple of weeks before most symptoms don't negatively impact every minute of your existence. We are grateful that our friends have recovered and that our health remained uncompromised as we support it. We are so happy that so many members in District 34 dedicated time in the fall planning committee. One of the greatest things that truly resonated with us while reading the plan presented was the acknowledgement that this is a complex situation and teaching and learning success is intentionally intertwined with a responsibility to ensure the health and safety of our students and staff, both physical and social emotional. We feel that the information compiled from the committee and the data presented by the cabinet at the last board meeting was a little confusing. What it communicated was clear, but the manner in which we might be using it to inform our practice as educators in a community was not. In a previous letter submitted to the board, we thought that the data only represented 1% of our parent population. This was incorrect, and we acknowledge that. The actual data represented 25 to 45% of our parents, depending on the survey. There was an HR survey to determine whether or not teachers would be eligible for emergency leave based on their situation. We struggled with this data because the purpose was to gather factual information rather than an effort to gather feedback about the well-being of staff. In this, we were not able to address the concerns outside of the legally framed questions and hoped there would be an opportunity to discuss other risk factors related to an in-person return. The district surveys indicated that while 73% of respondents said they would return, 26% were not sure, while the GEA survey indicated that 17% would not and 16% were unsure. For both surveys, these numbers raise a red flag. This is between 25 and 35% of our staff. Can we really afford to potentially lose 25 to 35% of our staff? We are grateful that the cabinet and board continue to review input from survey responses. We equally appreciate that District 34 acknowledged that ISBE language is problematic and don't know how we can return to in-person learning if we have not reconciled the ambiguities. Knowing that you are seeking guidance from our district nurse and local health officials to make decisions that allow us to create the best learning environment possible for students while mitigating the risks to students, staff, and families is significant. It makes us feel more confident in the decision to come. There are some questions that remain. If we consider in-person learning when the possibility of remote learning looms around the corner and is almost guaranteed, what is the intent? What is the impact? Do we cause more trauma and insecurity for students to transition in and out of different scenarios than picking a path and staying the course? How do we begin to focus on the consistency needed for positive social emotional connections that pave the way to educational achievement when the possibility of ping-ponging between alternating formats threatens this? These things we must consider. We also need to consider what will happen when we lose our first student or educator to COVID and contact trace it back to exposure in a D34 program. While everyone knows PPE is going to be available, distancing as much as possible is important for some students with specific needs. While we know that some families and educators are ready for a return, others are experiencing overwhelming fear, anxiety, desperation, and terror at the thought of returning. We are concerned that there is no way to mitigate these intense feelings and anxiety that are a direct result of a potential return to face-to-face learning. Sorry, I lost my place here. It hopped. When this happens, even if it is with a lesser percentage of families and educators, how then do we expect anyone to perform when they are met with the intensity of their emotions every single day as they arrive? Until we have further clarity on how the safety and wellness of each individual is going to be ensured, it is imperative that we continue with remote learning. When we say remote learning, it must be different than what we did in the spring. We know this. Our parent data supports that a dramatic change is needed. As a district, we worked tirelessly through a crisis, and all the energy and work was not in vain. We did the best we could when thrusted into the unknown, and our school board not only acknowledged this, what was done was highly praised. We've been met with many challenges and are always capable of rising to the task. An example of this in the most recent pass is the referendum. It passed. To get this to pass, we had to identify the needs of the district, make plans, connect with the community, staff, make more plans, connect again with the community and staff, all while doing ample behind-the-scenes work inside the district. When the discussions about this began, it seemed like an insurmountable dream, and it came to fruition. This is hashtag We Are D34, hashtag Somos34. This is what we do. We know that if we put our energy and thinking into how to continue to do things spectacularly in uncharted territory, we will. Sincerely, Naomi and Colin Bailey. Next, we have Tracy Kite, parent of current D34 students. While we very much want kids back in school, like everyone else, it should only be done following all the guidelines set by the state and other governing bodies, including the use of face masks, except when kids are eating, etc. Therese Meyenberg, parent of current D34 students. With goal, can my son receive the special needs he requires? For example, speech therapy. Next, from Nan Ross Meredith, a staff member. Good evening. My name is Nanette Ross Meredith. I am a math interventionist and president of the Glenview Education Association. A veteran educator of 29 years, I have been proud to spend the last 20 in District 34. We thank you for your continued time and energy in making this very difficult decision. We have studied the evolving scientific data about the state of COVID-19 in our region of Illinois and the village of Glenview, reviewed the work presented by the Fall 2020 planning team, and surveyed our members on multiple occasions. We've concluded that the health and safety of all students and all staff must be foundational to any return to in-person learning, no matter the scenario. The Glenview Education Association, Illinois Education Association, and National Education Association have continued to advocate that the health and safety of students and staff must be the highest priority when discussing how we will continue learning in the fall. NEA President Lily Eskelson Garcia and NEA General Counsel Alice O'Brien have provided national, state, and local leaders with guidance that states the absolute preconditions for opening safely are a scientific consensus that the virus has been contained and that the local health infrastructure can effectively address current and future outbreaks, and a plan to contain the virus that includes robust COVID-19 testing, effective contact tracing, and case isolation within the school community and in coordination with broader community and state efforts. Many staff members have written to you personally to share their concerns for safety of students and staff, as well as personal stories of the impact of this important decision on themselves and their families. We have provided you with the responses from 2 GEA member surveys. While there are many perspectives, it is clear in the 450 pages of data that our members have a grave level of concern and trepidation about returning to any kind of in-person learning. You have heard the concerns and hundreds of questions that educators have about how we will return to learning in the fall. Many of those questions must be addressed before the start of the school year, and many others additionally before a return to in-person learning. Processes and protocols must be in place. On behalf of the Glenview Education Association, we must implore you to make this decision that best supports the health and safety of students, staff, families, and community. We must begin the school year remotely. We look forward to continued collaborative conversations as decisions are made and processes and protocols are created that address not only the health and safety, but also provide the information that we as professional educators need to be prepared to provide the level of high quality education that we and our community have come to expect of Glenview District 34. Thank you for your time. Next, Lindsay Malmanis, parent of a current D34 student. If we end up moving between educational approaches, full-time in-person, hybrid, and remote, have you defined what metrics will be evaluated in order to determine a shift is necessary? For example, will we migrate if one person is symptomatic, if one person is sick, if the community infection rates change? This would apply to a migration both toward and away from in-school teaching. Thank you. From Adam Sloan, parent of current students. First off, I want to say thank you to the D34 leadership for thoroughly laying out at the July 13th meeting what each modality, e.g. adapted in-person, hybrid, etc., will look like if and when it is employed during the 2020-21 school year. Moving forward, no matter what perspective each of us brings to this discussion, I think we can all agree there is a high probability that we will experience more than one modality during the upcoming year. Tonight, we're learning only about where we start. To that point, two questions I hope are answered this evening. One, what A, specific data, and B, associated criteria will D34 use to drive the decision to move from one modality to another during the academic year if necessary? Will these metrics be made publicly available? If not, why? Two, with evidence that the risk of COVID-19 itself and downsides of remote learning vary by age, how will D34's decided approach account for the different risks and needs by age group? Next, from Igor Kolesnikov, a parent. Detailed description of e-learning model for this year, live streaming of classes according to the student schedule versus self-guided plan of the day with minimal supervision, last year's model. Please explain what you're going to implement. From Mary Hoyland, a staff member. Every year at curriculum night, I share with my incredible families what I have also shared with my students, that my #1 job is to keep children safe, physically, emotionally, socially. Right now, I cannot make that promise to families because I simply don't feel their children or I will be safe. The closing of in-person school is necessary for public health. I know it's extremely difficult for working parents. I have 3 elementary-age children of my own with no clear plan of how to support their own remote learning. But lack of support for working parents is a government failure, not a school one. I want desperately to be with my students. The world simply won't allow that right now. Glenview teachers are smart, creative, and hardworking, and we will make remote learning as special as possible for our students while also being able to guarantee safety. From Kiran Singh, a staff member, it is good to open the school. From Lauren Singer, parent, my true hope is that there is a form of in-person school. We now know so much more. If we do not have in-person school, I would like direct guidelines that will be followed to start in person. I would also like to know exactly how my 6-year-old is expected to learn via a computer screen. We all know this is impossible. You need to provide the community with age-appropriate plans, as I think there is one thing we can all agree on, and that is that children of different ages have different learning needs. A teacher from our district even posted on our parents group that kids 2nd grade and below need to be in-person learning. Please tell me how my 6-year-old is expected to learn the same as a 13-year-old. Please give me guidelines of how this is going to work. I'm part of many medical groups. If you want statistics, I am happy to give them to you. Illinois has done an amazing job. We are still under 4%. This is time to have kids, especially young ones, in class to get to know their teachers. I am a nurse. I have worked through this, and teachers can too. It does not get less scary. Masks and hand washing works. Thank you to so many who are working tirelessly to serve our community. From parent Laura Coleman Brayhart. While I've read that school fees will be unchanged, could it not be argued that unadjusted anything other than 100% in-person schooling is probably going to raise some eyebrows? What is the justification for keeping fees as they are? To that end, what adjustments are being made to the school supply list as students aren't sharing supplies? Thank you. From Lisa Kane, parent. I'm a parent of 2 D34 students. We've made the decision that our children will attend the GOAL program, and we appreciate the district is offering that option. Thus, tonight my comment is not so much about advocating for my students as it is about advocating for D34 staff. COVID cases are on the rise in Glenview. The Glenview pool was shut down twice. Some Glenview baseball team members had to get tested. It is not a question of if we will see COVID cases in our schools, but when, how many, and to what extent. Along with being a parent, I also work in a school. In my school, we had family members get sick, hospitalized, and die. We had students get sick. Sometimes people improved quickly, and sometimes they improved only to face serious vascular and pulmonary health effects later. We don't know what all of the long-term effects of this virus will be, but I can say from experience that the short-term effects include trauma. This virus is still very much in our community. The science tells us it will enter our schools. People, students, community members, and staff will get sick. We are choosing to enroll our children in the GOAL program in part to protect their health, but more than that, to protect the health of D34 staff. It is my hope that families who are able to will consider enrolling their children in GOAL in order to reduce the number of D34 staff who must work in the building. Holly Menziara, parent. If the board chooses the hybrid model, will the district schools take us for certain students to be paired together in order to help working parents share, coordinate childcare and transportation of children? From Megan Tchaikovsky, will more outdoor activities and learning be encouraged, weather permitting? From Shane Bill, I am interested in the safety precautions put in place should students return in person. From Alexander Gavriloff, the Glenview Academy for Learning sounds like a good option for our family. The information available on the web is not very detailed. Is there more detailed info to be found anywhere? From Tracy Kellner, parent. Thank you to the board and D34 admin that have taken so much time out of your summer to figure out this coming 2021 school year. Whatever the outcome ends up, I personally support all of you for this hard decision and keeping our community safe. Thank you. From Rupali Saini, parent. I want to know the district plan for 2020-2021. From Matt Brannon, parent. If we do not let children be in class in person, we're deliberately harming the youngest for the benefit of our older, more vulnerable neighbors. My heart goes out to those in fear of our suffering from COVID-19, but that fear should not stunt the development of our children, and I've yet to hear from anybody who thinks that e-learning provides an adequate education. We know it's important for children to be amongst their peers, and we absolutely cannot, should not let fear negatively impact our children's future. I pray the children, their well-being, their education, their future, guide your vote and not fear. From Robert Glassner, staff member. First and foremost, I want to thank all of the administration and members of the Fall Planning Group for their hard work in developing the proposed plan for the fall. Tonight is the first time I have ever addressed the board because I've always had the utmost faith in this group, and I still do. But tonight, I also feel morally compelled to advocate for our students. I want to be clear, I want to return to work. I don't know a single teacher who isn't yearning to be back in the classroom and starting a normal year that we all took for granted. But the data is clear, it is not safe to open schools. I am sure that over the course of these next few hours, you will get a wide array of comments, and no matter what your decision, people will be upset. Tonight, they will mention how other countries have successfully reopened schools, but won't mention the outbreaks in those same reopened schools in Sweden, in Israel, and in China that forced those schools to close again. They will mention the successes of Canada and New Zealand in containing COVID and getting back to normal, but I won't mention the vast differential in testing capacity. They will mention how the AAP advocated for reopening schools, but won't mention how they walked back on their original statement. They will mention how child infection rates in the United States are the least affected demographic, but won't mention that the first thing we did as a nation was to separate children. They will mention academic integrity and not wanting our young scholars to fall behind, but they won't mention how no one mentions kids falling behind when discussing the 1918 flu. They will mention the essential services that are provided at school, but won't mention the countless hours our social workers, psychologists, interventions, and support staff have spent via Zoom and in buildings providing these services this past spring. They will mention how kids initially appeared to contract COVID less frequently than adults, but won't mention the recent study out of South Korea, contact tracing during coronavirus disease outbreak, South Korea 2020, that children aged 10 to 20 spread COVID as frequently as adults. They will mention how Illinois seems to be doing better than most of the nation, but won't mention that today marked the 7th straight day of the positivity rate increasing, or that today marked the 6th straight day with 1,200 plus cases. I respectfully ask anyone who is advocating for the hybrid model or the adapted in-person model, what specific metric are doing better now than when we closed school in March? This is no easy task, and I do not envy you, but I ask you to be brave tonight when making your decision because our children need you to be. We know it is not safe to open schools yet. That is why this meeting is being held over Zoom, and that is why meal pickup today and every week since March was contactless. I respectfully ask that the board consider one of two radical options because they are what is best for our children. Option 1, take the 14-day pledge. No in-person learning until Glenview has 14 days with no new cases. Option 2, open brick and mortar schools, but keep all learning virtual. All building spaces are utilized to ensure social distancing. Parents who need a place for their children to go so they can work have a place to send them. Teachers can focus on providing high-quality virtual instruction, and teachers who are able, willing to go back in person and supervise can do so. Thank you for your time and your consideration. Next, from Steve Model, remote learning is a disservice. He's a parent. Remote learning is a disservice to the students, and D34 should acknowledge this. If you go this remote pathway, refund us our tax dollars to send the kids to private school. Grant Coster, parent. Why is that in-person education not deemed an essential service? Both my wife and I are in healthcare and deemed essential services. We have taken all the precautions to protect our health workers and our patients. Why can't we take the same precautions in education? From Faisal Amdani, parent. Offices are closed. You are having Zoom meetings and are too scared to meet in person. Numbers are going up, yet you want to expose children to COVID. Why? From Yelena Polyakov, parent. Concern about not having actual classes. And Mr. Model submitted several comments. We are only accepting one comment per period. You can submit another comment for this period. And this next one is from Mary Coe, parent. Hello, my name is Mary Coe, and I will have 2 daughters attending Hanking Elementary School this upcoming school year. I'm a nurse practitioner, and my husband is a physician. Though this current COVID pandemic poses new challenges, we are both hopeful that we will be able to send our children back to school this year, with the understanding there will be some risk, even with improved safety interventions. Risk is very individual, and some are risk averse while others are not. As with all hot topics, I think we need to provide options for both staff and students based on evidence and what we have learned so far about COVID-19. I am pleased to see that numerous options are being considered, including online academy, in-person classes, and hybrid learning options. This is an unprecedented, challenging time, and I am sure the Glenview School Board is actively considering new policies and procedures to adjust to this new normal. Fortunately, the framework for managing exposure at work, daycare, and in the home has already been established within the healthcare profession that my husband and I both work in. I've attached the policy and procedures from the daycare affiliated with Northwestern Memorial Hospital, which has stayed open throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. I have also included the Northwestern Memorial Hospital infections prevention and exposure policy. The Glenview school system should be able to use the Northwestern medicine policies and CDC guidelines as a template for how to prevent and manage COVID exposures. These policies all emphasize frequent temperature checks, hand washing, and wiping down high-touch surfaces. Airborne illnesses are not new, and the policies in place to prevent spread are decades old and have been proven to be effective. These may have to be altered for our schools, but the framework used by hospitals is there. Despite having patients, families, doctors, and staff in the same building without windows that open, hospitals have reported limited cases of COVID-positive healthcare providers and no major institutional outbreaks when the protocol is followed. As our understanding of how to prevent and treat COVID continues to improve, these numbers continue to go down. Hospitals have remained open with healthy staff numbers, as have the affiliated daycare centers. The value of teamwork through this unprecedented time is, without a doubt, very important. One suggestion would be to provide a COVID exposure hotline phone number to have all questions answered in a timely manner. This has been very helpful within the hospital to provide guidance while decreasing anxieties. I hope you will take the time to review the attached documents and see that these interventions are very straightforward to enact and have been proven to be effective. By borrowing from these policies used by healthcare systems and daycares, I hope we can provide a safe school and work environment for our Glenview students, teachers, and staff that will enable in-person classes. Please see the attached. Thank you for your hard work and consideration. On a final note, 80% of parents voted to return to school in some capacity. I hope we have elected officials that represent the populace. From Haley Hirsch, parent. My child has an IEP and participated in e-learning last spring. She is going into kindergarten and refuses due to short attention span to spend time on the computer. How will she receive her services from the school if we cannot get her to pay attention to the computer? And I don't have a last name for this parent, so I'm not going to read that one. And the last one of this participation period is from Shabina Alam, a parent. What options and accommodations will be made for special needs children who need a one-to-one aid? And that is all of the comments from this participation period.
All right, thank you, Kathy, for reading all of those, and thank you to everybody who submitted a comment. Again, there will be another opportunity later in this meeting for more public comment. Before we went to public comments, I had asked Dr. Deli if he had any comments to make at this time. So Dr. Deli, I'm coming back to you with that same question.
Thank you. Just one point of interest, I think, and pride that I hope people appreciate knowing. Our food services department and actually many other staff members who helped in this have served to date 140,020 meals to children in need in our school district. It has been a huge operation, and a lot of big hearts and big thinking went into making that a reality. And so I did want to recognize that and applaud the efforts of all of those who took part in serving that many meals. Thank you.
Yes, in this difficult time, that is one thing that we can look to help us smile and look for the good in all of this. So thank you for letting us know about that, Dr. Deli. So at this point, we are moving on to consideration of resolutions, also known as our consent agenda. We have one item on consent tonight, the personnel report. May I have a motion and a second to approve resolution 21-9 personnel report?
So moved, Jim Baumstark.
Second, Katie Jones.
This is a roll call vote, starting with Diane Stefani.
Sorry, I was muted. Aye.
Scott Nelson.
Aye.
Mike Corman.
Aye.
Katie Jones.
Aye.
John Hagee.
Aye.
Jim Baumstark.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Motion carries. That brings us to consideration of other resolutions, our fall learning plan and action. As a reminder, Dr. Deli will have some remarks. There'll be a presentation. There will be board discussion, which will culminate in a vote. As we heard in our public comments, and as we've heard many times over the last month and more, there are many differing points of view within our own community as to how the school year should begin. And there will be no one option that will satisfy everyone. But I think it's really important to note that all of us are united in at least several respects. All of us, parents, administrators, board members, want to protect our most precious commodity, our children. We're also united in the hope that no harm comes to anyone. And finally, I'm sure we're all looking forward to the day that COVID-19 releases its grip on our community, our country, and the world. May that day come soon. Until then, we must try to find the best way forward. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Deli.
Thank you very much. Before we begin our presentation and discussion on the fall planning that we've been so busily working on, I had a few just comments that I wanted to make about the educational landscape that we're working within right now. First, we all know that schools were thrust into remote learning in the spring with really very little time to prepare. The format we were able to produce with such little time served its temporary purpose as best we knew how at the time. The school board, the administration, and the staff joined parents in wishing more than anything to see children return to school in person, and that will remain our priority. But we must be able to open the schools safely for children and adults, and when we are operationally positioned to be able to do so. Over the last 5 months, we have received educational and operational guidance from the Illinois State Department of Education, the Centers for Disease Control, the Illinois Department of Public Health, and others. The guidance that we have received, while well-intended, has proven in many cases to be ambiguous, onerous, conflictual, and in some cases, simply impractical. Many parents and staff and board members have asked dozens of logical and thoughtful questions concerning our options to begin the school year. You just heard many of them. Many of those questions are being addressed either in our presentations or in the FAQ document that we have developed. Please know, though, that other questions require more time for us to gather more information before we can answer them completely. And still other questions will likely remain unanswered until state guidance is either updated or amended. I also understand completely that our decision to begin school in any scenario will leave some of you disappointed. There is no one right answer to this dilemma, and any amount of even the most rational thinking results in a secular thought pattern. I also want you to know that I care deeply about you. I care deeply about your children. I also care deeply about our teaching and support staff and our administrators, and that we have brought a lot of emotional and intellectual energy to our planning, and we're about to share more of that with you now. So Kathy, if we want to pull the presentation up.
It is up and on the screen, so you're ready to go.
Well, then I'm missing something. Hold on. Oh, there we go. So whatever tonight's decision brings, please know that we are approaching this in a very flexible fashion. We are committed to clear and open two-way communication with all stakeholders, and we are focused on creating the most effective environment for teaching and learning that we can under the challenging circumstances. Next slide. So we'd like to just summarize the options that we talked about on July 13th at our last board meeting. So the first of which was the option to start our school year in what we're referring to as Remote Plus, and we'll review that in a little bit more detail with you, while we continue to monitor local and regional COVID-19 data so that we can transition to a hybrid model when that's possible. The second option was to begin the school year in a hybrid model where students were receiving the teaching and learning in both a remote and an in-person experience. And then we had a third option, which was to bring all the children back in what we refer to as an adapted in-person model. And I should note that with any of these options, our goal program, which we're going to review with you more in a moment, remains an option. So enrolling in a remote experience is something that will be possible for a parent and the parent's children in any of these scenarios.
So that's a recap of up to July 13th. Now I'm going to share just a few things that have happened since July 13th. It's been a busy couple of years in those couple of weeks. We have conducted additional parent and staff surveys, as well as surveys of our substitute pool. We have reviewed many emails to the board, and as Natalie Jack Horowitz said at the beginning, the board members and administrative team have read and reviewed and carefully considered all of your words. Our operations team has met very regularly and done additional operations, safety, and health planning. We have created staff groups for input and implementation. We have working groups that are going to, after tonight's decision, move full force forward, just like the planning team did, just like the learning team did, just like our summer school team did in developing the framework and the details of what fall will bring, and additional focus groups to inform their work. We are preparing a staff survey to send out tomorrow, and we're planning for ongoing communication and input and support. So if you were sick of receiving emails from us before, get ready, here we go. Mary.
So as health and safety remains our #1 priority, I want to review the public guidance that is sometimes somewhat conflicting, but some of the takeaways that are important is that we as a district, when we are in person, will implement all prevention strategies. We will monitor any local transmissions within our community. We continue to monitor those weekly. And when we are in person, we will schedule students for cohorting, which is grouping students together so that we prevent the spread. And we will, no matter what decision is made tonight, we need to remain flexible and plan, and it will be necessary that we will pivot if necessary to other models to keep health and safety a priority. And these guidance have truly not changed at all. I think the most important piece to the general guidance is we really will be very strict in enforcing that individuals, both staff and students, will need to stay home when sick so that we do prevent the spread of the virus or any virus. Okay.
And things that are not new in the past couple of weeks, we don't have a lot of new guidance that's really different or helpful in our planning. The ISBE released new learning recommendations, but really that it's not much that's new to us. And there are, most importantly, there's no update from the June 23rd guidance that defines what as much as possible means when talking about distancing. And that's something that we are hoping to get more guidance on.
Good evening, everyone. When it comes to operations and in-person learning, some of the ways in which we can mitigate risk is by putting procedures in place to make sure students and staff that are coming into the buildings have been screened, self-screened, and reported into our systems. That's something we've talked about before and plan on continuing to do. Another key to safely returning is the use of face coverings, another PPE. And as we've talked about, we've got several masks that will be distributed to staff and students for the year. In addition, the district will increase cleaning by disinfecting all buildings daily, additional cleaning in high-touch areas throughout the day as we're able. We'll also have hand sanitizer and wipes in all the rooms for frequent hand cleaning, certainly before and after eating, and wipes to clean work areas before work begins. To help enforce new process and procedures, we'll also be posting signage to help with these reminders of distancing. Also making some changes to the classroom setups. In many cases, up to 6 feet distancing between the desks. However, based on the room and class sizes, this may not always be possible, even with only half of the normal class size present, as in a hybrid model. Some of the rationale why we weren't prioritizing younger students, as maybe some of the other districts you've heard in the area may be doing, does have in large part to do with class sizes and bigger square footage in their rooms. So that's something to consider. Transportation, again, similar to a typical year, with the biggest change being that students will all have assigned seating. This will help with contact tracing. Food service will continue in any scenario, realizing that student meal times and locations will vary this year. While eating without masks, students must maintain 6 feet. And for this reason, we've asked principals to spread out eating throughout their buildings. If students or staff are not feeling well and exhibit symptoms once they arrive, we've identified special rooms in each building as a COVID-specific infirmary. These rooms, again, will be staffed, equipped, and will help make arrangements to get folks home for care. And lastly, as you can imagine, we believe it's in everyone's best interest to limit building visits during this pandemic. So if visits are critical, we're asking folks to contact the main offices to make those appointments.
All right, and as we mentioned, we've conducted several surveys. The district and the GEA conducted surveys of staff, and we also conducted a survey of parents after the 13th, when we provided more information about what the options might be in asking the preferred solution. You can see we sent out the survey in different languages, but about 70 to 75% overall of our parents would like some sort of in-person learning, either hybrid, you see in red there, or in-person in any environment. And we have a significant number as well that would enroll in the goal school. So you can see those details, and the themes that came up are not much different than the themes that we heard in our spring survey right after we ended the school year in our e-learning environment. Parents are concerned about physical health and safety as well as emotional well-being. People express concern about the local COVID conditions. Remember, this survey is about 2 weeks old, so around the time it went out, there were increasing reporting of cases in our community. There are parents concerned about academics and falling behind. Many discussed the concern of juggling any remote learning time, particularly working parents. As we heard in the spring, and we heard again, more synchronous time in any remote scenario. And we also had parents comment about the need to provide equitable education to all of our students. Heather.
Thank you. HR conducted a survey of staff in early July in order to help with planning for the 2020-21 school year. And the purpose of the HR survey was to communicate and educate about options to staff that are part of new laws that came about through COVID. as well as to take in questions from staff. But I did not want to be telling staff in late August, well, here's actually what type of FMLA or what type of sick leave would apply in a situation like this. And so again, the survey was used to share some of that information so that when asked certain questions, staff would have enough information to be able to apply those laws to their own personal situations. And it was very different than from the GEA survey, which was shown there briefly, and we'll get to that in a second, which was more open-ended in nature, and which was, especially in the second version, about, as you can see from the quote taken from Nan Ross Meredith, used to continue to confirm the high level of anxiety and concern that staff members had. It was a very much open-ended survey. And so we had very different purposes in putting information out and gathering information in. And I think that works well, because what we were finding, and thanks to the GEA for sharing their survey results, their anonymous survey results with us, we were able to see that many of the pieces of planning that were in place or that had been considered were right on target with questions that staff had. And so it reinforced and affirmed some of the work that we were doing. And then I was able to share with the union, with NAN, things that I was getting out of the HR survey, where we were seeing similar, again, questions and concerns about staff in terms of FMLA and sick leave. And Kathy, if you go back to the first slide of mine, I just wanted to note we had 325 certified staff members respond and 145 support staff. So it was a combination of both certified and support responding. It was intended to go out to all staff. We are low in regard to the response, but still a healthy response in which we would be able to extrapolate information and make some predictions, which I'm going to use in this presentation. Thank you, Kathy. So in one of the questions that was asked, kind of in summary of the HR survey, was, do you expect to return to work in the fall if there is in-person learning? So this was even prior to the 1st July board meeting. And as you'll see, vast majority are saying yes, but 27% are no or not sure. And when I look at just certified staff, pull the certified staff out of that 27%, that came out to 17%, or if we talk about individuals, 55 individuals, certified staff members, said no, they wouldn't be able to return, and they were able to give me some information about why not, and then same thing for not sure. I would say that the bulk of those responses, especially those for not sure, had to do with either health considerations, personal or for someone they cared for, or not yet knowing what their own children's school situation would look like. Because remember, the survey went out in early July, and so many school districts had not yet made decisions about what school would look like for them in 2020-21. And so our own staff were dealing with that same situation for their own children. But I'm going to use this number of 55 to kind of bring you along the story in terms of what staffing would look like in the age of COVID. Thank you, Kath. Along with staffing, we have to look at the ability to provide substitutes for our teachers. So a little bit about first our subpool. It looks like a very healthy subpool. We take out 11 and we have 119. The 11 are secretarial custodial. If I'm just looking at, again, certified staff for the purpose of tonight's presentation. Again, seems very robust to have 119, but that could be a little bit misleading because we don't have 119 ready to work each day. Sometimes people get on a substitute roster in a district, but that's only one of several districts that they are acting as a substitute in. And that gives them a lot of flexibility and freedom to choose which district they're going to work in on any given day. Also, it could mean that someone has identified that they've been approved to sub in our district, and they may try it out, and they may not pick up any more jobs after trying it a few times. And so that subpool is in constant flux. And it doesn't represent that we have 119 or 130 active subs each day or each week. And you're going to learn more about that as we move through the information tonight. We send to the substitutes each summer what we refer to as a letter of intent, meaning those that are on our rosters, we want to know, what are your plans for this coming school year now? And we only had 36 respond out of that 130 that yes, they're planning on subbing for us in 2020-21. We didn't have a response from 73 and no responses, total 10. So not a very healthy sub pool at this time. And yes, some of the subs where there was an opportunity for open-ended information indicated that it was due to COVID as well as their own health issues, not feeling safe to be able to sub in schools. So right now, I'm concerned about our sub pool. And so I used another survey to reach out to our substitutes after the letter of intent went out in early July. Then a couple of weeks later, my survey went out, and Kathy will show that to you next. So I asked a few more questions than are what here shown here, but these are the most important ones for the purpose of our conversation tonight. And you'll see that I reference an increased daily rate. We are competing with neighboring towns, with neighboring districts, as well as those all along the North Shore for substitutes. I'm in a large group of HR directors, and we share information constantly and use each other's ideas and use each other as resources. And we have all been asking each other, what are we doing about increasing our subpools, and what are we offering them in terms of enticements to work for us? We've looked at our sub rate in the last year or so and known that it's time. We have not increased our sub rate recently, and given the situation, it seemed the appropriate time to increase our daily rate. Indicated what that was in the survey so that substitutes would know what they were getting into. We also added an enticement if they were willing to sub for us for at least 30 days. And we looked at what we refer to as a cadre substitute, meaning we would hire them for the year. They would work for us each day. Each day they would report to the same building, and then the principal would identify how could they be utilized to ensure appropriate supervision for students on any given day. And so I'll talk about the responses next. We had a total of 70, so better response to this survey than asking them for their usual letter of intent. So that was good that I've got a little bit more data to work with, a little bit more confidence in the data. But as you see here, and again, what's in the back of my mind is that number of 55. 55 staff members in early July indicated that they would have difficulty possibly returning to work. And I've got numbers in the 40s, even in the 30s, when it comes to our substitutes returning to work out of the 70 who responded to the survey. And that's knowing that there's increased pay for cadre subs, knowing that there's potentially benefits for them as well, and looking at an even higher increase rate for a 30-day commitment. So when we put all of this together, we have a situation where I am concerned about our ability to ensure that students are supervised. What happens in a typical situation? Let's pretend, I think we'd all like to, that COVID doesn't exist. If we go back to February, even though I think it existed back then, but we can pretend that it didn't. That was the last month where we had a full month of school as normal. And when I looked at our certified staff absences for that month, we had 493 absences that were sick or personal days. So we take out professional development, we take out anything else that's not a sick day or a personal day. And we look at how many of those actually needed a sub, because not all of our staff members are certified staff members. Again, this is only certified, would require a sub because they would have had students coming to them that would have needed supervision. And that's 319. Then you see that we only had 237 of those positions filled. And what Frontline, which is the online system we use to record absences and for substitutes to pick up jobs, does is they calculate what's referred to as a fill rate. So for February, we had a concerning fill rate of 74%. Is that typical? Well, when I look back through the whole year from 2019 to 2020, from September to February, the average was about 81% fill rate. We struggled in 2019-20 to have substitutes in all of our classrooms where they were needed. This is a statewide issue, and it has been going on for some time since the economy has picked up and there are more opportunities for people to work in different settings. And so, and again, we're competing with other districts for the same type of workforce. And so this is why we have struggled to ensure that we have appropriate supervision. So, well, obviously school went on, classes were held. How did the buildings deal with a situation like this? The principals and assistant principals are authorized to look at the subpool that they do have and figure out using the subpool, as well as using associates, our support staff, who are licensed as substitutes, be able to cover classes. That means, though, when they're repurposing our associate, our support staff, to act as substitute teachers who are licensed to do so, that the work that the associates would have been doing that day to support instruction is not happening. So there's a push and pull on the system. There's a strain on the system on a day when a building does not have all of the substitutes needed. It's managed because obviously we have to make sure that students are supervised in any setting, but it is a strain on the system, and this becomes almost a daily event where for principal first duty business is walking in and trying to figure out what is the substitute situation and how do they need to be redeployed in order to ensure student safety. So now we're going to put this all together with what's happening and what's predicted for 2020-21. So if I were to look at this situation where in early July, we said we have the potential for 55 staff members not to be able to work, certified staff members. And I look at our substitutes and who's returning as a substitute and willing to work as a substitute in different settings, in person and remote. I'm concerned about the situation. And there's also, while I've been talking mostly about our certified staff members, we have to also realize that this impact cuts across all staff groups, because we'd have the same concern if I don't have enough associate support or custodians to ensure that we can maintain all of the health and safety of the building, our nurses, because obviously we are going to rely on them to help ensure that students are safe. I have to worry that also we're going to have situations where, as Mary Garrity referenced, we're going to be looking at students who are symptomatic in school and sending them home. And so as that is playing on the system, we would be doing the same for staff as well. And so that creates another opportunity where we may not have enough staff to supervise students. The other piece we have to consider is that those 55 staff members are telling me that they may have their own health reasons why they are not able to do in-person learning. So they have a qualified disability or they are in an at-risk group, and I have to look at whether or not I can accommodate those risks through some type of arrangement, which might mean I'm actually telling principals and the teaching and learning team who needs to be in a remote setting only because they're in an at-risk group or have a disability that puts them at risk. And so they need to be a remote teacher only and can't do in-person learning and teaching. And so this means that your child may not have the teacher that is usually assigned in this situation, because again, we have to look at coverage and making sure that not only are we covering all classes, but that we're also utilizing the information we have about staff health in order to ensure that they remain healthy and are able to do their job. So what I would recommend using this information is, if I had to say, well, what would be a way to guide our thinking in terms of in-person learning, I would need a subpool that's equal to the number of staff who are on FMLA leaves or sick leaves, and I would add 30% of that number, because I would want to have a cushion, because as you saw, in a typical setting, we don't have a 100% fill rate. So I would want to have a cushion in terms of the subpool to give a better likelihood that I'm going to have the right number of subs on any given day, given all of the complications that are related to COVID. I think I'm going to stop there, because I know there was a lot of information in a short period of time. Thank you.
All right. I think Mr. Engel is connecting. So I'm going to jump in here. And when he comes online, we'll share the presentation. So thank you, Dr. Hopkins, for that information. We're going to transition now to the teaching and learning models and scenarios to share, and some of it's a review and a reminder from our previous meeting. So if we look at the next slide, we are really honing in, and you can see by the title, Remote Plus. And what is the plus? And just a quick overview and reminder, our exceptional fall planning team developed this continuum of teaching and learning, of services, of a delivery model. And you can see from the fully remote, and then in between are these different scenarios that we've been talking about tonight and referenced in the board parent and community and teacher questions and submissions, to fully in person. So underneath, again, you can see the remote plus with some specific information. And then we have our hybrid model, where we would be looking at, and we're going to provide more detail in subsequent slides, but that's basically 50% of children and a different scenario in terms of teaching and learning, a blended hybrid model in the hybrid. And then we find ourselves at the adapted in person. And I see that Mr. Engel is back online. Buddy?
Yes, sorry about that. You can keep going. I will chime in as appropriate on this slide.
All right. I want to share the stage for sure.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so, again, the whole purpose of this continuum is to provide options. It's to ensure that we're doing the best modeling to meet the needs of our children, that we have different opportunities to engage our children in different types of formats. And really much of it is driven, as you've heard, by the external health factors and the virus and the COVID impact in terms of what we would consider a traditional fully in-person experience for our teaching and learning.
Matt, I apologize for getting kicked off, but making sure that we touch base on the fact that as we develop these plans and we focus on looking at each individual plan, as a district, we were able to hold, just like we held parent focus groups, we were able to hold additional staff focus group meetings talking about specific areas of concern and specific areas that we know needed to be addressed as it related to moving the program forward. And so, as mentioned earlier in the presentation, we have now developed working groups that will be fine-tuning the work that was laid out by our earlier group of educators around remote plus, hybrid, and adapted in person, and really taking those components to the next stage. And we'll talk a little bit more as we go through the remote plus and the hybrid, and really try to share with you the differences between being thrust into a pandemic in March and having more ample time to understand where we're at, the needs of students, the needs of learning, and the modes in which we can provide the needs and meet those needs through a combination of different opportunities. And so we hope through the rest of this presentation that we're able to highlight both the common factors, but more importantly, the differences as we go forward.
All right, so let's dig into a little bit more of that detail that Brian was referencing. So right out of the sort of the development process, the remote plus, the online experience, really is rooted in our exceptional staff. We've collected feedback, we've processed the feedback from parents, from staff members themselves, from children, and we really process that feedback. And our teachers who are incredibly passionate about developing and delivering these types of instructional experiences that align with these priorities that you see in the first bullet point, including inquiry, equity, multilingual experiences, student-centered approaches. And then those are all the learning standards. And again, those learning standards transcend the online experience as they would in the classroom experience. We are beholden to those learning standards to ensure that by the end of the year at any given grade level, children demonstrate as much mastery as they can. And especially when we're talking about our early childhood program all the way through 8th grade, our WE to English language development standards, our WE to Spanish language development standards, they're all designed to wrap around the child in our curriculum and instruction to make sure that, again, we're moving towards mastery of skills in those standards. The other significant factor that we really want to point out on this slide is this notion of new content. And that was a little bit delayed and sometimes stymied from the spring when, again, we were thrust into the online learning experience. And even from the Illinois State Board of Education, there was some confusing information about delivering new content, new experiences in those standards. So we will begin the school year with that spirit and that energy, that notion, that idea. We will be indeed providing new content. And typically in the experience and what parents, what we expect, what our teaching staff and all of our staff expects is synchronous design. Typically that new learning involves a lesson, a mini lesson, some type of direct instruction that is providing a foundational stepping stone or beginning point or introduction. There's so many different ways to start that process. And then you can see from there, the next critical step, early childhood through 8th grade, is small group and experiences, engagement, the opportunity to really zero in where we would again be using synchronous experiences where a teacher is with a group of children or even one-on-one as much as possible. So that's a critical element that I wish to really emphasize, that we are dramatically wrapping our brains around the best way to provide that for our children. And then the last piece, that asynchronous opportunity, again, it's balance, because as many people have referenced tonight, this idea that screen time is a factor. We certainly understand that, we appreciate it. And for now, in this model, the synchronous delivery is something that would involve a screen, and then that asynchronous time is for all the opportunity to engage in the lesson, the follow through, the projects, everything else that is going to make the educational experience with that lesson powerful.
So the next one is to talk about how this opportunity is different in the plus part or part of the plus part as it relates to dating back to March and experiencing it in the spring. And as Matt alluded to and Dr. Deli said earlier, we were provided with different guidelines throughout the spring experience. And some of those guidelines were wonderful, an opportunity for us to build and grow, but also some of them were limiting in the way in which we would want to provide as enriching an environment for students as possible. So as we look at this, our focus is still to be continually diligent about connecting and making connections with students and addressing their well-being. But looking at how this will look different for EC through 8 students around learning and engagement, it's important to note that as we go into the school year, no matter what environment we're in, whether it's remote plus, you're in the goal school, you're hybrid, or you're adapted in person, we will have and be working with our report cards. We will have daily attendance and procedures and schedules that we'll be working with. We will be providing standardized assessments, including NWA, as a means to helping to gauge where our students are at and where they get to, as well as having the all-important formative and summative assessments that help to drive the instruction and the high quality of instruction of our teachers throughout any mode of teaching. And and that delivery method and gaining that feedback of what students, where they're at, how we change our instruction, and how we move them forward. The other component is that it's important for us to establish, if we are in a remote plus or in the goal school, what does that mean about learning? What does it mean about how learning takes place? While the content and the information will be the same, obviously the delivery method and some of the modes by which the information is either provided or collected is unique to the experience that students will be going through that they may or may not have gone through in the past, and providing them as well as parents with the understanding of what is the objective when we get into a synchronous environment? What is the objective when we get into an asynchronous environment? These are the same questions and conversations that take place when we're in person. When do we do large group instruction? When do we do small group instruction? When do students learn on their own and then come back to and reflect with their staff member? Because the one key component we know is that the person in which is moving them forward and helping to provide that, being the staff member, is able to, in small groups or one-on-one, as Dr. Silverman stated, work with students and to see where they're at and adjust the learning to move it forward. The other additional component is creating clear expectations, both for students and for staff. Again, in March, as a parent myself, not knowing, when meetings were, what the expectations were, how classes were or weren't consistent with each other. That's an important step we know for parents, and one that we have worked through, that we're working with our teams of creating the schedules, creating the expectations, creating we know that these things will happen with each classroom, that students will be provided these opportunities, and that staff will be provided these opportunities as well to learn and grow and to build so that they're capable of delivering in a remote plus environment. The last one on there is also about resources and support for parents and caregivers. Again, providing online opportunities to allow parents to see why we're doing something the way in which we're doing it and how it aligns to how we would have done it in school. Because again, the end goal is the same. The delivery method is what we're looking at changing based on our physical placement of where we are. At the end, it does talk about regular consistent schedules, as well as regular consistent schedules with embedded flexibility for all students around our fine arts and PE subject areas.
So when we look at opportunities for this in-person, and again, we're always regulated and we're always in tune with what is safe. And again, the information we have as of today, we would capitalize on the safety factor when it's possible to be outdoors. And again, this is opportunities for our early childhood children, all the way to our 8th grade children, everybody in between. We would also prioritize, as you can see in the presentation, some of those life transitions or opportunities where you may be traditionally or typically switching buildings or programmatic changes. We're sensitive to that shift, and we'd like to take advantage, if we could, these regular, safe, small group in-person opportunities. Again, if the safety factors allow for that. Why are we doing that? It's that second bullet, first word, relationship. It's absolutely essential. It drives our heart, our passion, our love for our children and for our staff and for each other. And that community building around those relationships with the social emotional focus is just a beautiful opportunity to see. And again, we would like to thrive in that environment when it's possible outdoors as an ideal setting. The second element in this slide, I have to share a little bit of a story because it stems from summer school. And when people put their mind to something, it's incredible. And the summer school provided an opportunity for us to really look at designing something that is different, again, super creative, a little bit away from maybe traditional academics into an inquiry engagement-based experience for children that was truly incredible. It's still on our website. I'd strongly encourage you to check it out. It's so exciting. I love what was built, and we can keep that alive for a few more months here as we get into the school year. But the power of people coming together is around pickup of supplies and materials. And we knew that a critical factor for some of our children was providing them with some supplies in terms of engaging in this inquiry experience. And so between the GEF, the PTA, and incredibly passionate and committed staff members, we were able to deliver 500 little learning packs to our children. And if I didn't see it with my own eyes, I'd be like, wow, I can't believe this. But it was so incredible, and it was so efficient. I mean, we're talking days to turn this around. It just, the spirit of it and the sadness of COVID, like just re-energized passion for when people come together and want to make something happen. And again, thank you so much to the GEF and the PTA for their support. And then those additional opportunities, again, our staff are so creative, so committed. You can see what's listed there. Those are just what we can think of. There's going to be so many amazing opportunities. And again, it's a creative moment to innovate in this scenario that we're in.
So we're going to transition a little bit and start to talk about some of the logistics around a hybrid model and areas that hopefully address some of the questions that have come up in the past and provide some framework from which working on moving forward. And so the first thing is around, we know that our model for hybrid would include a Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday connection for students to work with staff in person, which would then leave the opposite days, including Wednesday, for remote learning. As we start to set up, if we were to go in a hybrid model, we'd be looking at placing students. One of our number one goals is to try to place students, siblings, families into the same day. So if your child was in first grade and you had a child in sixth grade, that they'd be attending school on the same days. And so what we're looking at is, in order to decide that and to figure that out, we'd be looking at the alphabetical order as well as by phone number, and then if there was any identifying component by a parent. The reason for that is because some families have different last names as well. And so if we can cross-reference that with a phone number, we're able to work through as best we can that breakdown of what students would be coming on what days in order to balance that out across the district. The other component of in-person would be our ability to balance and the equity for students, to ensure that when they're in those days with us, we're providing learning opportunities, that we're working with the students and balancing off the classroom experience with what is taking place at home, along with the work that's taking place in school. It's also important to note that in a hybrid model, 60% of the work is actually remote and 40% is in person. The access, both remote and in person, will be through a consistent online platform, and the in-learning opportunities will build upon some of our online learning, as well as our online learning will build upon some of our in-person opportunities. But we do know that one of the reasons, if we were in a hybrid model, to bring students in is to provide the opportunity for staff then to have access to students about that connection, about that opportunity to focus on their work and areas in which they need improvement. Teaching priorities and expectations obviously would be clear, as we laid out in the Remote Plus, setting up very guided structures as it relates to what that day looks like and how we can support both in school as well as out of school. Am I the next slide as well?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry about that. One of the things in terms of the hybrid model is the connection between the school and the community, and maximizing the benefits of in-person learning, including providing opportunities for SEL lessons to be applied in person, and having that connection. One of the items that we laid out in a hybrid model is the early connection in the morning as well as the conclusion of the day for those students who are at home, so that in this environment, the classroom becomes a whole, even though they're split in terms of the days in which they come. Teaching and reinforcing outlines and expectations. Certainly as the year starts, no matter if we're in a hybrid or if we didn't have COVID at all, we always are working on routines. When we start a school year, we're working on setting up expectations, providing opportunities for students. And this would be no different, except for the fact that a lot of those expectations as we began the year would be around the routines of safety. What does it take, to be safe in school? What does it take to learn online? How can we support your remote work while you're online? And fostering that self-direction and the regulation strategies around how do you focus as you're working in school with a mask on, 6 feet apart, distance from everybody, because that too will be a different environment than what students would have come into in any other given year. Instruction complements online learning. And that is the idea of more of a flipped learning, where there's learning that goes on through video or through other means with students at home. And when they do come into school, we're able to follow up with the teacher expert in providing where are kids at, assessing them, providing re-engagement in the lesson or re-instruction when students don't get something, and moving that forward, as well as providing some modified fine arts PE schedules for EC5, as well as utilizing a full schedule for 6-8.
So when we think about the other piece of hybrid, and that's when children are in their remote setting, probably their house or another scenario, we are wanting to focus on connectivity and connecting the instructional experience they had in person in the hybrid environment, because what we're striving for when they're remote or they're in their home, not at school, is actually engaging in practice and projects and hands-on authentic learning. Again, the goal would be sort of asynchronous non-screen time, where they are writing and they're reading and just doing some super exciting experiences that are a connection and a carryover from their in-person experience. The other piece to this is to ensure that we do speak of the notion of phasing in over time all the content, because it, during a 5-hour instructional period, there's a lot of engagement and there's a lot of content being shared and being taught to our children. So it would be a very deliberate, careful process as we begin to incorporate all of the content that we share with our children every day, and including even in the middle school. We want to build routines, and we want to strive in this middle part of the presentation where we're looking for sort of independence, where children are at home and they're being successful. They're feeling good about the work. They're having opportunities to actually complete the work and see what it looks like, it felt like to them as learners. And again, when they come back to the classroom, it's something they're going to share with their teacher and their classmates. And then the last part is, again, that connection. We keep saying it, and we keep saying the relationships because it's so critical. And we would look for opportunities to zoom in, if you will. Even though you're at home and your classmates are at school, we're going to make those connections and ensure that, again, early childhood, actually all the way through, for every possibility, we can make connections and really hone in on our social emotional learning experiences for children.
Dr. Garrity?
This is just a review from the last time, a reminder of what does hybrid look like for different students. So our students that are general education, some of them would attend on Monday and Thursday, and other students would attend on Tuesday and Friday. I just want to remind what Eric Miller mentioned was that our buildings will be thoroughly cleaned every evening. A student with special education, depending on their level of need, may attend the Monday, Thursday, or a Tuesday, Friday, receive their specialized instruction while they were there or at home. And the more significant needs that a student had and required specialized instruction, they would attend in a hybrid model more often. So adapted in person. We wish that tonight we could really thoroughly talk about what it could look like and is it possible? But I think we have to go back to the most important component is, are we able to comply with public health guidelines in an adapted in-person environment within our Glenview 34 buildings? Things that we cannot forget is that we have to have sufficient staff each and every day. We have to have sufficient substitutes each and every day. And we have to have enough space to really be able to implement those public health guidelines.
So a little bit of more sort of information around our online academy. This is our sort of action about being proactive. Unfortunately, the virus and COVID is a lot of reacting to different situations and things that are happening to us. We're trying to get a little and think through a little bit ahead of the curve and what possibly could happen into the future. So the notion of this online academy is that it's a structure, it's a learning opportunity, it's a learning design that is basically always remote. So whether we're vacillating through the different types of models that we have available, we did want to provide it's sort of peace of mind, the opportunity to confirm both for our children, families, and our staff that we will keep a strand of this online experience, this remote learning. So when we talk about this online academy, we're talking about our staff, our amazing EC through 8 staff members. Some of this is going to be about fit, and some of this is going to be about needs of everyone and matching those needs together. We're looking at a trimester by trimester opportunity. Again, we're really striving for flexibility and planning out the best possible experiences and the best possible programming we can provide to our children and our families. It's critical too, and this has even evolved a little bit since the beginning of July. Like everything that we're planning for, there's a little bit of evolution, iterating, and sort of design. We are hearing, and we're very, very cognizant of the notion that homeschool engagement, and even as much as possible, we want to be able to connect and have, when we can, a homeschool delivery, even though it's called Goal. Again, just think of it as full-time online learning like Remote Plus. But remember too, Remote Plus is sort of a model that could shift, and Goal won't shift out of online learning. So that's kind of the difference there. You can see by those other 4 bullets when we talk about this design, again, our early childhood through 8th grade students, it's the same curriculum, it's the same opportunities as our 3 other designs, Remote Plus, Hybrid, in person. Our goal and commitment is seamless transition. We're gonna really communicate around that. Our whole child commitment in terms of all of our programming needs, fine arts is going to be a piece of this experience for our children and our staff. Again, when we feel that the health standards are comfortable or we're meeting them, we could flex, and we're putting these ideas out here to pursue because we think that they're wonderful for children and our staff. And it might be something that we would pursue in terms of some in-person opportunities. And then that last piece, and Brian was talking through this, that consistency. And we understand the need for that. And it would, again, be something that's really deeply ingrained into our thinking around this programming.
So the next slide talks about, how it works. And one of the, we get Matt and I and Mary and Kathy and all of cabinet, and I'm sure many of the board get a lot of questions about the specifics. And this by no means will lay out all the specifics. However, I think some of the big questions we hopefully can address right here. And that is, we currently don't know the staffing of the goal school. And the reason for that is we don't know the specific students, the grade levels in which those students are going to be, and how that's going to play out. And as well as we don't know the staff that are going to be in a position where we would have them in the goal school to help support this online learning environment. Once we do, obviously, as Matt laid out, we're looking at providing and keeping as close as possible that home or that school and connection. So if we were to have a group of 20 or so first graders from Lyon, we could have 20 or so first graders from Lyon in a classroom together, and it would be their goal class and they go forward. The opposite could be said too. If we only had 5 kids from Lyon, then we'd be blending kids together to create a first grade learning environment that would support the same curriculum, the same standards, the same assessments, as well as ending at the same place or right around the same place at the trimester. And it's a very important goal of ours. And again, a very difficult component in any given year, but that is having pace and delivery of pace for all of our models to be in alignment. And that goes to the second bullet here, and that is about our goal staff, whomever they are, collaborating and communicating and working with our remote plus / hybrid / in-person staff. And that is the full spectrum, whether you're an EC teacher, you're a music teacher and you're supporting both areas possibly, or you're a special ed teacher and you have a caseload and you have a student in goal. How we do that is an important connection in making sure that we as a district are supporting our students all at the same level, no matter the mode in which they're being provided their instruction. The next part is Goal and Remote Plus are truly designed to mirror each other. A lot of people talk about if you're doing Remote Plus, and Matt kind of shared some comments around this, why do you need Goal? And again, it does come back to that ebb and flow. If as a district we said, hey, we're not going to be going in person or looking at in person for the first 5 months of school, that would be a different conversation. That would be a conversation where we say, okay, we're all Remote Plus. That's not currently the place we're in. We are striving to get students back in school. We are striving to get into an environment where it's safe and appropriate for us to get back in school. And because of that, the goal school is not a transitioning school in the sense that it's not going to switch every whatever we determine. But those two schools, if we were in Remote Plus and Goal, would be, from an educational standpoint, almost replicating each other in the sense of what they provide, how they provide it, when they provide it, and the structures in which they provide it.
So just a reinforcement, and again, this is repetitive because it aligns, and you know that's the whole purpose, to ensure the accountability structures are similar. And when we're talking about similarities, we're talking about our report cards, our district design report cards, our attendance procedures, our standardized assessments, those grade level assessments that are provided throughout teaching and learning experiences. And again, this notion and this commitment to our standards-based education, and again, from early childhood through 8th grade for all of our learners, and looking at all of this through an equity lens to ensure that we are an all-inclusive, encompassing experience. And that's the commitment in this program and this sort of learning model.
So I'd like to just spend a moment and talk a little bit about the different phases that have been outlined for you. And I do want to thank you for your patience, because I know we've put a lot of information out there to you. But you know, as we talk about Remote Plus, and as we talk about hybrid, and as we talk about adapted in person, you know, we've talked about them separately. but I do ask you to view these different modes of operation as being on a continuum. So it is very likely that although we're going to make a decision on how to begin the school year, that the objective is still to have children back in school with their teachers, with their peers, learning. And we know that that's what's best. But in order to do that, we will likely find ourselves moving in and out of these various states of being. And that's what we tried to depict there graphically for you, because you see how those arrows move really in two directions. We have to be agile. We have to be prepared to be able to move from one condition to the other. And as we move forward, be prepared to potentially move backwards. And so we've tried to give this really a lot of time and attention to think through what that would actually look like and what kinds of conditions would have to be met in order to trigger some of these migrations. And so we just wanted to outline really in a basic form the metrics that we would be looking at to help us make decisions about how to move through these various stages. And certainly the first is our regional health data. And you may know that the governor recently divided our state up into 11 regions. We happen to reside in Region 10. And in Region 10, that would be the area that we would be looking at most specifically when we talk about regional data. As Dr. Hopkins outlined, staffing availability is something that is a key variable in our ability to effectively operate the schools. So having a good sense of what our teacher and associate availability is, as well as all employee groups, as she mentioned, custodial, food service, bus drivers, nurses, that list goes on, including our substitute pool, making sure that we have supplies, PPE, cleaning equipment that is on hand and available for a specific period of time. That's something that we're going to have to monitor. And of course, any executive orders that come from the state of Illinois. So as well planned as we can be for any one of these particular scenarios, we also have to be ready for an executive order to potentially change that direction without much notice. So the point of this slide is to let you know that we will be honoring metrics. These are the categories of the metrics. We will be doing more work with some more granular detail to determine what the actual trigger points are that might have us move between these areas. So we wanted to just depict this for you at this point in our planning. And that does lead us this evening to my recommendation. Now, the board has been considering and will continue to consider in their subsequent conversation this evening all of the options and all of the possibilities. I do have a duty to make a recommendation to the school board, and I'm doing that by suggesting that we begin our 2021 school year in remote plus, which has been described very well. So thank you team for all of that hard work, with the goal option. So with our remote learning academy as an option as well. During this period of time, we will continue to monitor regional local COVID-19 data to determine if a transition can safely and operationally be made back to school. And we are saying that we will not be prepared to do that any sooner than a 5-week period of time. And part of the reason we have targeted that is because parents deserve, as do staff, deserve an opportunity to have at least 1 week's notice of transition time before we move into another operational element, which then, if you backwards map that, requires us to have assembled and analyzed the data necessary to make that kind of a proclamation. So that's why we're proposing this window. Obviously, the health and wellness, as we've said repeatedly this evening, of students and staff remains the highest priority. This start of the school year provides us additional time to monitor health data. As I have indicated, we are in Region 10. The last time I checked, in Region 10, we had a 7-day increase in the positivity rate. Last I checked was 5.3%. Someone can probably easily correct me on that, but it's up from 4.5%, and that was just over a 10-day period of time. And so we're looking very closely at those metrics. This also provides us additional time to determine the specific availability of individual staff members, our ability to secure reliable and qualified substitutes for any individual who might not be able to deliver their services. And it provides us additional time to, as I indicated, further develop these metrics in a more specific fashion. And so this recommendation, again, is coming from me to members of the school board as a starting point for our school year.
All right.
Kathy, I think
Yes.
Kathy just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the what's next, and then I know people are eager to hear us stop talking so that you.
Regardless of the outcome tonight, tomorrow emails will go out to staff and parents. Parents will begin to be able to make their choice in Power School, whether you want the goal option for your child or children, or the other option that will have an in-person learning opportunity. And then HR will be sending out a survey to staff about return to work. As we've all kind of said tonight, we know we haven't answered all the questions. So we are hosting a couple of webinars, one for staff on Wednesday and one for parents on Thursday in the evening, and we will send out the links to those webinars for access, and that will go out in emails tomorrow. And we know we're asking a quick turnaround to make your selection, but the parent choice registration deadline for goal or the other option is important because teacher assignments and class placements will be shared on August 17th. I don't know if we've talked tonight, I know we have before, about all the work that's happening in our buildings. Our building leaders are doing an incredible amount of work to organize schedules and really bring to reality what the environment will look like in the fall. And so we need to give the principals and assistant principals and in the buildings time to make their class placements and assignments and collaborate together with the goal staff to make sure that there is some seamless connections there. Staff return on August 18th, and the first day for students is August 24th. So that's kind of a timeline. And again, the working groups and focus groups will continue to meet. We'll continue to answer questions as best we can. You know, we keep sending them an email, and we will keep updating our FAQ and adding to the information on our website and sharing it wherever we share information. And we'll keep developing resources to support staff, to support parents, to keep those connections, and to provide clear communication.
All right. I take it we've come to the end of the presentation. Just
Yes.
checking. Okay.
Yes.
Just want to make sure. Well, thank you to all of you for that vast amount of information that you've shared with us tonight. And Dr. Deli, thank you for giving us your recommendation. I'm now going to open up the floor for the board to ask questions and make comments. And I'm just going to kick things off with a few comments of my own about the presentation and the items of information that I was looking for to help me come to my decision about where I stand on how we should start the school year. The one thing that really struck a chord with me is the fact that what we're looking at is a continuum. We've given 3 options, so that kind of makes us think in boxes, but really these aren't in boxes. If we start in Remote Plus, we will be building on that and working towards hybrid, and that was an important piece of information for me. The other piece of information, I wanted to see that students would be brought into schools on some level in every model. Admittedly, in the Remote Plus model, that probably the opportunities will still be developed and it'll be in small groups, but it is something to build on, and it exists in every model presented, and I was glad to see that. And I also saw that in every model, thought was given to special education students, and that would include IEP and 504 students, but I did see that gifted was also in there. And I think we have to keep those students on our radar as well. So I was glad to see that that was in the presentation as well. I will go out and on a limb, so to speak, and share from the top that I do support starting in Remote Plus for a number of reasons. I do firmly hold the belief that the best environment for students is to learn in their classroom with their peers and their teachers, but it must be done in a safe way. I believe that Remote Plus is not closing the door on in-person learning. As I said, it's a starting point that will be built on, and I urge all of us to continue to push towards adding on the ability for students to come into our buildings as safety dictates. I also believe that as much synchronous learning as we can have is important, and that was clearly presented tonight, that that's a priority. That makes me feel more comfortable with Remote Plus as a starting point. I also believe we cannot take our staff out of the equation in our deliberations. We heard in our remarks, and the board heard in many letters, that staff is deeply concerned. These are dedicated professionals who have always strived to create safe learning environments for our students. And now they're also worried about their own safety. And I will say that their fear is palpable. So by starting in remote with small groups of students, we allow both students and staff to acclimatize to the new normal. And as we slowly get used to this, we slowly gain confidence in the safety of doing this, in the safety of bringing small groups of students and teachers together. So I think starting in Remote Plus allows us that. I also believe that as I've gone on and read, as everybody has, I'm sure, in the news about all of the knowns and unknowns about COVID, I feel like there is a lot of questions still out there about what is the true risk to our students and to our staff, what the age of vulnerability is, the possibility of asymptomatic carriers, whether asymptomatic carriers can be spread. The list goes on. By starting in remote, I feel it gives us the opportunity as well to observe what is happening around us. Not only numbers, but what's happening in school buildings where there are students. And we can learn from that, and we can make ourselves better based on that. And knowing that we're moving on a continuum helps with that as well. And I also can't help but notice what is going on in our community and our state. Although death rates have dropped, we continue to have high numbers of daily cases reported. So in my mind, it's pretty clear the virus is still circulating, even within our own community. So that is sort of my thought process for how I arrived at my decision to support Remote Plus as our starting point, knowing full well that there are many parents who will be disappointed in this decision. And I say to you that we will be pushing as much as we can to get our students in our buildings, where we just have to do it safely. And I have to put everybody's safety at the forefront of my thinking. So I think I've spoken enough, so I'm going to let other board members get a chance to ask questions or make their own comments. I don't know who wants to start that off. If anybody wants to raise their hand. Jim Baumstark, go ahead.
Well, I do have some comments maybe that I'll share later, just kind of overall perspective, but I guess I just have a couple of questions. That one thing I'm thinking about is the potential difference in the consistency of instruction between the two models. Primarily, like, what I'm thinking is like in a hybrid scenario, the risk of needing to like shut down classrooms, have teachers call out because of diagnosed cases and things like that, feels like there's a potential for kind of a bouncy learning pattern for a student that might not be quite that way if we started out in Remote Plus. Could someone just comment on whether they agree with that kind of assessment, that there's a potential for like a stronger consistency to start off the school year because of that particular risk?
I'm not sure if you're asking board members to weigh in or.
Oh, no, I was asking maybe one of our
Yes.
administrative professionals for that.
No, I think that's what I was trying to communicate, is that given the complexities of providing enough staff and enough substitutes, and with monitoring any student or staff member with COVID symptoms, that means we will have a lot of transition should we see anybody that is either symptomatic or we know has a confirmed case and now has to be quarantined. And so there will be a lot of either transition or a lack of fluidity in terms of there being consistent staff providing instruction. If we're talking about in person, it will impact the ability to provide consistency.
Because one thing that didn't really come out in the presentation is what will happen if there is, or when, I should say, when there is a diagnosed case. Because even if it's not from a District 34 transmission event, right? It's just someone who got it some other way, but they're a student in our school system. We have, thousands of students. That feels like that's a virtual certainty to happen. Like, I don't know, is it just a classroom to get shut down? Does the whole school get shut down? Is it for a day? Is it for a week? Is it for 2 weeks? And so that's what I'm getting at with that question about consistency of instruction. And maybe we don't know the answer to those exact questions yet, but that's what's on my mind when I'm asking.
Yeah, well, we do know a little bit, which is, once we come across or learn of a confirmed case, we immediately connect with the Cook County Department of Public Health. They have committed the contact tracing element of this puzzle. You want to think about it that way. And then at that point, whomever that is, whether it's a student, whether it's a staff member, they go through the process, and the school district will have to be of great assistance to them. With whom has that individual had contact with? And what were the circumstances? Was it on a bus? Was it in a classroom? Was it in a hallway? So being real deliberate about that. And then those who have come in close contact with that individual also must quarantine. So it definitely has a spawning effect. A lot of that depends on, where the positive person was.
And do we have a good sense about what close contact means? I mean, some of the things I've been reading is like close contact might be inside of 6 feet without a mask for 15 minutes. And like, if that's what close contact would be, it would seem unusual if that would happen in the school environment. But if it's just, I walk past somebody with a mask 3 feet away, that sounds like the whole school could get shut down. So is there clear?
Right. Well, I mean, I think we're going to probably, I like to think we're going to get a little bit more guidance on that, but I've been hoping for that now for months. But what you cite, Jim, is correct, where, if it's under 15 minutes or within 15 minutes and, a person didn't have a mask on for whatever reason, that definitely, that's a qualifying condition. And whether it's less or more likely to happen is part of this experiment that unfortunately we're going to be thrust into at one point or another. So Yeah, it's something that I think, you know, if and when that happens, and the likelihood is when, you know, we've got to take some direction from the Cook County Health Department.
Okay, and I just have one other question, and I'll yield to our other board members. In the remote scenario, remote plus, I'm sorry, is there thought currently about kind of the location of where the remote teaching would take place from? Like, is it, I feel like remote teaching from a classroom could definitely have some benefits for kids because it provides a consistency of feeling like you're more in school. The teachers can utilize their classroom and their classroom experience to be able to teach, even though there might be students that are not physically present. I just didn't see that noted in the presentation. Is that still a TBD, or is there some early thoughts on that?
I can speak to there. I've watched several webinars regarding that exact concept. And so while we as a district haven't come to the conclusion of where we will be at, I do know that some districts have gone in or are going to go in, but also some districts have created virtual environments that replicate the classroom that they have in the sense of their backdrops are the classroom that they were in, so that students would be then seeing and being able to interact with that environment that they had before.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, you know, science situations and things like,
yeah.
you know, it'd be helpful to walk over to a desk and show some physical stuff that would be more easily done in a classroom than from your living room. But, okay. Natalie, you're on mute. Were you
Yeah,
about to?
I just figured that out. Thanks for letting me know. John, I did see your hand go up there.
Yeah, I'm happy to go now. That's fine. You know, I just did want to piggyback on one of Jim's points there, Dane. Metrics of moving, you know, compliance with the safety plan needs to be, you know, by the time we're talking about positivity, the plan has failed. So if we're, you know, let's not wait till that happens if our plan won't work. And then I would say, you know, after this 5-week period that you're asking, quite frankly, would we have the ability to go into hybrid that either A, looked very different in that it was 5 days a week, half day, or something like that? You know, again, with half day, like an AM and a PM. And in addition, different programs, again, at the different grade level schools, the K through 2, 3 through 5, and 6 through 8. And, you know, you don't have to answer that now because, but you know, I think that this should be considered. You've all done a wonderful job of a lot of my questions, but I would like to know more about the specialized services that could be available to Remote Plus kids. And you know, I got a little confused, Dr. Silverman, on the, and again, thank you for your providing some answers. But on the idea of the plus and Remote Plus being limited to small groups in a short time frame, I get, I'm wondering the logic on that, because if we're saying that it's safe to follow CDC guidelines, and I believe that it is, to maintain social distance with masks, why can't we have larger groups available for that? I mean, in either scenario, they're wearing the safety equipment either way, right? So, you know, again, you don't have to answer that right now, but that is something I'd like to be considered as you plan for, you know, your Remote Plus. And, you know, secondly, I guess lastly, my last point is, you do this Remote Plus for 5 weeks, and it's a short time frame, and you're saying that you can pivot out of it, you know, and I'll take you at your word there, Dr. Deli. Your request, but you know, with the caveat that, I mean, it's a short leash. You know, we've got a vast majority of the community who is not in favor of this, and this goes for the teachers and the group who's creating the staffing shortage that we're relying on. I mean, this is the tail wagging the dog here, just to some degree. It doesn't, or at least it feels like that. and it doesn't feel good. But this remote plus has got to be robust. I mean, incredibly robust. If it looks, smells, feels at all like the remote learning from the spring, no way. We'll just become babysitters. I mean, we're better off. So just, if you're granted your request, please, all persons involved, make the most of it. Yield.
I'm not sure who might want to respond to John's comments.
So just for the specialized instruction, John, we do have a special education focus group that meets this Wednesday to begin to, now that once this board meeting is over, we'll have even more of a focus for the next few weeks to talk about what exactly specialized instruction will look like. But in some cases, depending on the needs of the students, specialized instruction can happen in person. We were able to do some assessments this summer safely, but there's a lot of planning and PPE that are required. And we want to ensure that the student is safe and that the parents are comfortable with it and that the staff are safe in terms of delivering the services. And so each of our assistant principals will work with their teams in developing for each individual student, which is why IEPs are exactly that, they're individualized. So it won't necessarily look the same for every child, but our goal and our hope is that we will begin to deliver some services in person in the remote plus.
I saw somebody's hand go up. Whose hand is up?
I can
Want
very
to add more,
quickly,
Matt?
if for somebody time me 30 seconds, John's question about the group size. All of our dialogue and thinking and entry point is in the most conservative, sort of safety oriented. So our words tonight were really down to that most sensitive of bringing kids together. That's why we said that. We have to try some of this because it's so brand new, the experience and the anxiety around it and the potential nervousness. So we wanted to keep the word small by design, because if it's successful and everybody loved it and it was great for kids, then yeah, we can move from there. We don't want to be like, we're going to have a gym of 200 kids, together. So that was the intentional talk.
All right. I assume no other administrator wants it. I feel like John's comments have been covered, correct? Okay. I see Katie's hand is up, so I'm going to let Katie go next.
So it won't surprise anybody here that I have a lot of questions and I have a statement as well. I'm going to start with, why did we survey the parents? What was the ultimate goal with that, if somebody could answer that?
I can speak to that. Part of it was to get an idea of, what if we were giving a choice, what that might look like. So sort of playing what if and combining the staffing survey to the parent survey. And we also, had open-ended responses to, hear what questions parents had, and understanding the themes and things that we can gear our communication to parents to make sure that we are clear and providing the information they need.
So I'm understanding that the hope was maybe that the number of parents that would maybe choose remote would be greater, in the sense that we would have more flexibility of sending less kids back. Is that fair?
Hypothetically.
Yeah, I think what we were hoping was to get a general, this is a survey, so it's to get a general sense of where people are, a richer understanding of what their concerns are. And it gives us a way to begin assembling a Q&A bank of the things that people are most interested in knowing about, which ultimately could sway their decision one way or another.
So, as others have mentioned, I struggle greatly with starting in Remote Plus, period. But I struggle even greater knowing that we do not have measurable metrics by which we are going to move forward before deciding to go into this. Because without those metrics, what numbers are we looking at? What do we want to see? Come September 29th or the week before, that would dictate us moving forward. And I feel they have to be objective, because if they're subjective, you're going to have people keep saying, well, we're not ready to go back. So what types of numbers are we thinking about looking at as we move forward to the next option?
So the categories of metrics were presented. If you're asking if we have identified a specific infection rate, we have not done that yet. We will, and we will do it in concert with public health officials to help us guide some of those decisions. We can pick a number, but we have to work in concert with those public health agencies. We're not just able to do whatever we want. So we need to be working with them as well.
But it's fair to say that we could open now in person.
We could.
So I guess what
I'm not recommending it, because when I see infection rates that are on the rise in our particular region, that gives me concern. But that would be, Katie, that would be an example of a specific metric that we could look at. So for instance, we could say, well, we need a certain number of days where there's not an increase. Or we could say there needs to be a certain number of days where there's actually a decrease. Or we could say that, we can't do anything until the number is, next to nothing. But we haven't vetted that on our own, because as educational professionals, we just don't believe that that's something that we should do by ourselves.
Okay. And then in terms of the synchronous, asynchronous learning, everyone has mentioned that the ages of children are going to differentiate a lot of that. And although I do think that synchronous learning probably needs to occur more, especially with some of the older kids, the young ones, I think it becomes problematic, because I'm just going to take 3rd grade and under. Most of them are going to require a parent or caregiver to help them remote learn. And that means that the timing has to be conducive to that parent or caregiver, most of which will be working. So I think we have to be careful with how much required synchronous learning we are going to ask for the K through 2 or whatever, K through 3 grade levels. I think it's beneficial, but I also know that we have to take that into account. And also, if those children have other opportunities to do other things in other venues around the community, which are all open and offering different classes and things for kids, they need to be able to do that, because those young grades and those young kids, that's what matters a lot. And that's, coming from that lens, I hope that that's being taken into consideration. I don't know if Matt or Brian can speak on that.
Well, I'll just speak from a literacy lens. We just started to engage in that particular content area, and it has a lot of depth to it, and it's probably one of the most essential entry point skills for that age group as they progress through the years. We are really honing in on as much either teacher created, I'm going to call them sort of pre-recorded videos as an example. There are some new professional resources out through our new units of study resource that we're pursuing, and we're trying to find the right fit. We agree though, there's balance. There is blending the world of, yes, at 10 o'clock, you need to be on this particular Zoom. And we understand, even from an equity lens, that we need to ensure that whatever is happening there, some of it's going to be to the best of our capacity. But we're going to be trying to do as much recording, building the asynchronous that can almost act not independently, but there's different ways to gain the introductory part to that asynchronous experience. It is a huge part of the design process. Brian, I
think the thing, Katie, that you were getting at is obviously the flexibility around the learning component, the age appropriateness of what a synchronous learning environment is very important. And so for a group of young learners, how we guide and how we develop and when we develop that age appropriate synchronous time is going to be very important. And to be open, that it's going to likely differ to not a level of how often, but a level of maybe what time, depending on as a teacher gets to know her classroom and gets to know her parents and gets to know really quickly when they provide those opportunities, and providing multiple opportunities for different times for kids to get that same level of follow-up to whatever the asynchronous learning was.
Okay. And then finally, like I said, I know I made a statement last time. I still stand by that statement. I know that I've lost a lot of sleep over this, like many of you have, and it's a decision that has been placed on 7 individuals on a local school board that should have never been placed on us. And I think all of us could agree on that. And although we have definitely different perspectives and we're coming from different lenses, I know we all can appreciate and respect everyone else's viewpoints. I do still feel that being in person is not ideal, but it is in the best interest of our students. We've talked a lot about staff, and I understand that they are a vital piece, as I mentioned last meeting, but the students are at the center of every decision we make, and I do feel that being in person is the best option. Health professionals and health organizations are encouraging students to be physically present at school. 4 days ago, the CDC came out with even stronger recommendations of bringing students to school in person. I believe that we are being guided by fear, not by facts in many of the cases. This virus is not going away, and even with a vaccine, it will still exist. And for the meantime, we have to learn to somehow coexist with it. As an individual on an elected board, I have a responsibility to put our students first, while also remembering that I serve our community at large. Our community pays tax dollars for a public school of which we won't be receiving the services that are typically expected. And many will have to spend or choose to spend additional money to hire people to help with that. I believe that the learning gap that already exists will become exponentially greater. I am disappointed that more work and effort wasn't done to bring our youngest learners and our children with 504s, IEPs, and EL learners into school, even partially, because those are the ones that really would benefit most from it. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Katie, for your thought out remarks. I just want to echo what you said. We are all coming from different lenses, but it's important to say that we do all respect each other's position. So thank you for your contribution. I know that Diane wanted to say something, so I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Diane.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to follow up on a piece of information that was conveyed to us. First of all, I want to thank everyone for the feedback, and I'm not going to make this real long, but one piece of information that was crucial to me was the GEA survey. And I was wondering, I know it's hard to do, but is there any way to kind of summarize that so we can just kind of have a quick refresh? I mean, you can't run schools without teachers. And one thing that we have to keep in mind is that we have great teachers here, and we don't want to have our teachers not able to teach. So I think those results were pretty crucial to me, and I'd really like to, if someone is able to summarize them at all, that would be helpful, just real quick.
Well, Heather, you'd be the best person to do that.
Absolutely. And what we're looking at is using the data from early July to look at the potential for staff to be out and how we can cover for that, because it's a given that whether it's COVID related symptomatic need to quarantine, or whether it's just day-to-day illness or personal need that staff have to be out, we have to guarantee that we've got appropriate sub pool in order to do that. The current situation is making our sub pool a little less viable. First, it was the economy impacting it during the last year or two, and now it's COVID concerns also impacting it. So what I was hoping to do was to entice our subs with the increased daily rate and long-term rate to be able to say, okay, we recognize that we're competing with others for that service, as well as to look at a metric that says we're more confident that we will have the substitutes that we'll need using data that I'm going to get from now an updated survey now that staff have a better understanding of FMLA and sick leave. I'm not sure, Diane, if that answers your question or if you're looking for more information.
You know, and I'm not sure, it's possible. I apologize for putting you on the spot. I'm not trying to, Heather. There was a survey too that was performed that was shared with us from the GEA survey. And the information that was in there to me was just very telling about what we can expect come fall. And to me, it kind of just showed me too how the staff is feeling about things.
For sure. For sure. I mean, I think that the GEA survey conveys a great deal of angst and concern and worry about how staff are going to be able to provide instruction as well as care for their own family in many situations. I had an email today from a staff member wondering, because she now knows how her children's schooling is going to be organized, would she qualify for FMLA because of needing time to supervise her child? And technically, she doesn't qualify for the FMLA based on this, the definition that we have from the law passed. And so that is going to be, what is that staff member going to do? Are they going to work out a solution for themselves, or are we going to see potential resignations? We've had people asking, is the board going to make it possible to have years leave of absence, but we know that can't happen unless there's an MOU. So there's a lot of things still in flux as people are grappling with the day-to-day realities of what they're doing with their families, not only their younger children, but their extended families in terms of elderly parents and things like that as well. So that's why I thought that a 5-week, I was all in favor of a 5-week period before we looked at that transition, because that takes us, enough past Labor Day where things have kind of settled, because some schools don't even return until after Labor Day. And we'd be able to staff would have a chance to see, can they work out their family situations so that they can work? Right. Because staff want to teach. I think they're not sure how they're going to be able to juggle the rest of it. And I believe we provide them some of that time, and HR has enough time to respond to them and their questions, we'd be in a better place to say, okay, we've got it figured out. And then working with teaching and learning, we can figure out how to cover all of the classes so that we're in place. Because right now with the hybrid, we'd only have half the staff at a time in the building to act as subs, which also exacerbates the situation of being able to provide that coverage and make sure that we've got everything in place. It would also give us obviously more time. I'm working with Kathy in terms of robust advertising for our sub pool so that we can shore up the sub pool as much as possible. So in the best case scenario, we have the workforce that we need to be able to provide in-person learning. That's our goal.
Thanks, Heather. I really appreciate that. I mean, I will convey that what I was hearing from the staff was a massive amount of concern about safety, a massive amount of concern as to whether or not they were going to be able to teach in the way they would like to and that they believe is social, emotionally good for children. And, feeling that concern, I mean, these are the adults that are going to be with our children all day. they need to be able to teach in a way that they feel comfortable. And I just think that's really important. I just remain very concerned seeing the case levels rising as they are. The coronavirus is not under control in our country, and we don't have border walls that are going to keep it out. So if we think that it's not circulating, we're deluding ourselves. I remain very concerned about the safety. It's a hierarchy of needs to me. The health and safety comes first, and learning. If you're ill and you have long-term health effects, your learning is going to come second. I think we have to keep them safe first, and that's just kind of what I wanted to echo here.
Understood.
So, thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Diane. I'm going to look to our board for any other additional questions. Mike, turning it over to you. I think you're muted. There you go. Thank you.
This Zoom thing. Okay, so I've got a couple. I'm going to be a little bit all over the map here. So just because I want to get some points across, and there's some pieces of data that I think that are important to me, and I think we've been asked by some stakeholders, what are the metrics that we're looking at? So I'm actually going to provide a couple that are guiding me. First of all, if this had been 2 weeks ago and we were trending the way we were the 2 weeks prior to that, I would have been highly motivated to open our buildings. A lot happens in 2 weeks with this pandemic, an awful lot. So whether the survey to the parents was 2 weeks ago or today, it's a snapshot in time at that moment based on the information that was available at that time. And I think because we have the latest information, one of the points I want to get across to everybody who's listening, we have 996 attendees. We were at 1,001 for a while, maxed out. We have access to data that most of you probably don't have access to, and because we are in the positions that we're in, we're seeking data frequently. Among the data that I look at are the Johns Hopkins website, which as of right now shows Cook County is the 4th most populous county with COVID-19 cases over 100,000 confirmed. Only Los Angeles County, Maricopa, Miami-Dade County have more. Am I fearful of that? Yes, I am fearful of that. Is it a fact? Yes, it's also a fact. I also look at the Cook County Department of Health, who has now told people in suburban Cook County that if you're traveling in Wisconsin, you have to self-quarantine for 14 days among 25 other states or 20 or so other states around the country. So if we have families that are traveling right now to Wisconsin or other places, they are not, in theory, if they're doing things the way they're supposed to do, they're not allowed in our buildings for at least 14 days after their arrival back. And that list seems to be getting larger. It just would be impossible for us to share every piece of data that we have with every parent that has an interest in this, even though we would love to. At the end of the day, we were elected to represent your interests, and that doesn't mean that it's always going to be a popularity contest. We have to weigh lots and lots of data to make decisions. One of the things that I continue to hear and I continue to want to reinforce, I hear the term IEP used, but I don't hear 504. I don't hear ESL. I don't hear EL. I heard it just a few moments ago, I think from Diane. I would feel much more comfortable understanding how we plan to help all of those children that are in need, not just children on IEPs, which are very important. But we have a lot of kiddos that need extra help. And my understanding on Remote Plus was that population of kiddos was the plus, that they were going to get the support they need in the buildings. I just want to validate that piece of information. Dr. Deli, feel free to take that one.
Sorry, it took me a second to unmute. Yeah, yes, I mean, that is the spirit of the Remote Plus, and if we did not echo children on 504 plans or EL students or those who otherwise have needs, please know that there was nothing intentional about that. That those are all focus groups that we feel very committed to, and we'll use these opportunities and create opportunities when we can. Is it fair to say, Mary?
Yes, I really truly should have said at-risk students and not just isolated out IEP students, because our discussions have included all of those groups that you mentioned, Mike.
Thank you, Mary. And I would say let's make sure we're over communicating with those parents so that they fully understand what's available to them in this environment. Matt, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I can confirm just with my constant communication and close working relationship with Raquel Kim and her department, some of our best practice examples actually from the spring were from our bilingual English language learner, dual language staff. Again, their drive and commitment to whether they were transitioning language, connecting language, we're going to replicate some of the practices that they were doing because they were absolutely exceptional. You're right, Mike, it gets lost. And I just want to be, out front that unbelievable teachers and they know there's a special drive behind what they're doing.
And Mike, that points to, I think, if you don't mind, the statement that Katie made earlier in regards to asynchronous, synchronous, and populations and students of different needs having different dynamics. We know that our bilingual and our EL teachers went to a level of providing, knowing that their students may have different access to the technology at different times during the day, and being able to accommodate that and model for us. So things that we learned through the focus group and through the work groups that we're about to start will play out into making and taking the best of what we had and pulling that forward and correcting some of the areas where we needed improvement.
Thank you. So just a couple of quick points and then I'll shut it down. First, I'm in support of the 5-week period broadly, but I'll be very reluctant to make that a best practice going forward, that we would say we're going to chunk our school year into 5-week periods. If we start to see trends that say, hey, we can open in 2 weeks, I don't want to be locked into a modality that says, well, because we set the precedence at 5 weeks, we're going to go 5 weeks, 5 weeks, 5 weeks, 5 weeks. I also feel strongly that at some point this year, whether it's now or later, we will be in remote. I'd rather do it now where we can get things under control. It's the beginning of the school year. This is, I love being a leader, being in front and leading other school districts, but this is one time where I think being a fast follower will benefit us. And finally, I haven't heard any discussion on liability. What happens if someone gets sick or someone's family gets sick, or there are no liability protections in place right now. Now the Congress is talking about it, but they're not in place right now. Has there been any discussion, Dr. Deli, with our attorney in terms of the liability piece of this as it relates to illness in the buildings? Or Eric?
Yes. The short answer is yes. Our current policy does not exclude COVID-related illnesses that may take place or be caused while in a school environment. However, many school districts, and we have information on this as well, are receiving revised policies, if you will, that begin excluding COVID-related illness in a workplace or in a school starting in January. And I believe that's how we are positioned. Eric, I'd like you to just chime in on that quickly.
That's right. So we've got our policy through the SCIP cooperative, and at this point there are no exclusions. Again, it's about willfulness and neglect, and if you're making every effort, we believe that you're better positioned than if you're blatantly disregarding anything that's out there. But we are being told sort of industry-wide as of the first of the year, unless there are, like other states, some laws that are changed in Illinois relaxing some of the tort laws, then we'd be in that same boat.
I
Thank
think
you so
John,
much for my time.
oh, okay, thank you. Thanks, Mike. I think John has something he wants to add about that last statement. So John.
Yeah, just you know, I know it's a constant thing, not for the thousands of people who are listening, but for the folks here. Not only do we have our own liability issues, but we are liable for the solvency of the co-ops in which we participate in their decisions that they make.
True.
Another drawback to that concept.
Okay, so noted. Scott, you have your hand up.
All right, looks like I get to go last. Thanks, I appreciate it. It's a great presentation. I'm really excited to hear how this works out when we finally vote. I do want to point out to everybody in the community that when we talk about hybrid and we talk about adapted in person, that is nothing like school in February. If I put my mask on right now, you'll never be able to hear or see what I'm doing in a classroom. So whatever we do, it's not what it was before. So that's something we really have to understand. I have been struggling with this for a long time. I'm in favor of starting in Remote Plus. I just think it's the right idea. The state has moved slowly through phases. I don't want to go backwards. I want to go forward. So I think it's time to start in Remote Plus, weigh our decision, move to the next phase, and get back into school where kids know what school is about. And the only way we do that is if we stop passing COVID around the community. So I'm urging parents to be good practicers. Wear your masks when you're out. Let's cut the numbers down in Glenview so we could get our kids back in school. So I'm advocating for Remote Plus, and I don't know if there's going to be any more discussion, but I would motion to vote on Remote Plus.
All right. I just want to, we're going to get to that very shortly. I want to react to just a couple of things some of you have all said. John, totally agree with you. I think we all agree. Remote Plus needs to be as robust as possible. I don't think there's anybody here who wouldn't agree with that statement, and thank you for making it. Katie, your point about asynchronous learning for young ones is a very good point, and I hope that we take that to heart. It does affect young ones differently than it affects our older students, and Matt, I know that you're keeping that in mind, so let's not let that get off our radar. Mike, I agree with you about 5 weeks not being our general template. I don't want to get into a 5-week rolling situation. So I think we all, I thank all of you for your really great comments, observations, and opinions. I see Jim would like to add something. So Jim.
I had kind of a wrap-up statement that I didn't want to start off with because I just had a few questions. If you don't mind, if I'm just gonna kind of, I'm also in the camp of supporting Remote Plus, and I just wanted to give a little bit of thoughts on my thinking there. First, I know a lot of people listening, so I just share a few details of my background because it can help add some perspective to my views. I'm actually currently a school administrator at a local private high school. I just finished up 8 years as a high school math teacher and economics teacher, and I also have 20 years of experience as an actuary, which is a profession that professes to have expertise in the modeling and assessment of risk. And despite all this quote unquote perspective that I have, it's still like an nearly impossible and difficult decision, right? Probably in some ways the most difficult one I've ever been involved in. Some current reflections like, hey, coronavirus happened. Until it's gone or effectively neutralized, we as a society just face additional risk. It's just higher. And then our society, really, our goal is to choose how we allocate between the risks that we can face. And really at this micro level at the school board, I really see that that's what we're doing, is we're balancing the potential health risks for our school community versus potential educational risks for our children by employing different teaching and learning scenarios. And the risk professional in me actually finds assessing these risk trade-offs extremely challenging because the quantification is so elusive of the risks and the benefits, with extreme wide ranges of uncertainty, right? You can find anyone who's going to give you an estimate. The risk is low, it's high, the benefit's low, the benefit's high. And, you know, I'm a math person, and like, just unfortunately, I've just come to the conclusion that there's no math I can do that's going to suggest the right answer here. But I do know that we're an education system and an educational community, and we are, because of that, we're better equipped to deal with risks and uncertainties in the educational arena than in epidemiology. So when faced with these trade-offs, I favor scenarios where educators are best equipped to tackle them, and that's why I'm in favor of Remote Plus. Just a couple points, like D34 is it's a large and complicated school system. And so for me, a lot of it comes down to operational risks of opening immediately under the hybrid scenario are high. For me, this suggests opening that allows for gradual steps. Like my analogy here is that hybrid feels like you're jumping a little bit into the deep end of the pool without a clear way to walk back to the shallow area if you need to, whereas starting Remote Plus feels like you can walk in and you can still get to the same place, but you can walk in there gradually. And if hybrid does quickly emerge as the obviously correct answer, you know, the worst case is that we took 5 weeks longer to get there. Someone talked about this earlier, transmission rates in Illinois are still pretty low, but there's really nothing about the data to suggest that it's getting better. And, you know, when you look over our horizons too, states around us and down south, like a lot of people are predicting it's just a matter of time before that sort of southern wave moves north. Again, just that suggests that caution is warranted. I personally actually believe that properly affected protocols can make the school environment acceptable risk. In fact, at my school, I am personally planning to return to school in the fall in person. But in a large school setting like District 34, I think the Remote Plus scenario allows for more testing of these protocols, especially as it relates to understanding the ability to execute. You know, that's kind of a theme for me, is this operational risk. And I'm still not crazy about the to extent possible guidance from the ISBE. You know, I'm sure we can get comfortable to a spot where we're as safe as possible, but is it safe enough? I don't know. We're all just guessing. And I also like how Remote Plus allows some flexibility in refining what that plus might look like. We know we had some ideas about what that might be, but I'm assuming as creative educators, everyone's going to come up with different ideas and have that evolve. Hopefully it only needs to evolve for 5 weeks, but if it needs to be longer, I feel confident that that gives us some flexibility there. And just lastly, I do realize from our surveys and letters to the board that there's a strong majority of parents that would choose to send their students to in-person learning were it available. Personally, again, I have a high school senior, and I actually would choose to send my daughter to in-person learning, at least from the virus risk perspective. But for me, operational risk and the potentially disrupted learning environment is a real concern. And so I really believe this gradual approach is warranted for our district, and starting in Remote Plus, I see it as accomplishing that most effectively. So thank you for that couple minutes there.
All right. Thank you so much, Jim. If there are no other comments or questions, I'm going to call for a vote. At this time, may I have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2110, Fall Learning Plan with Remote Start and Optional Goal Academy Enrollment?
So moved, Mike Corman.
Second, Jim Baumstark.
This will be a roll call vote. I will begin and then we'll go in alphabetical order. My vote is aye. Jim Baumstark.
Aye.
John Hagee.
Aye.
Katie Jones.
Nay.
Mike Corman.
Aye.
Scott Nelson.
Aye.
Diane Stefani.
Aye.
The vote is 6-1. The motion carries. Now that we have made our decision to go ahead with the start of the school year and how that will look, well, a lot of work lies ahead of us. And a lot of information is going to be coming your way, as Kathy Kajijian alluded to earlier. I urge everyone to monitor their emails and the district website. The August 3rd deadline for enrolling in Goal is coming up extremely quickly. So please tune into the parent webinar and stay tuned for more information. We are not done with our meeting. We have come to the discussion section of our agenda, even though we've been discussing just discussing the beginning of the school year quite extensively. We do have one item on our discussion agenda, and that is following meeting agenda. And our next meeting is Monday, August 24th. It is our usual practice to meet once a month. However, circumstances may warrant more frequent meetings. That decision will be made by the board in consultation with Dr. Deli with appropriate notice given. So there might be more information coming about future board meetings, but as it stands right now, our next meeting is August 24th. Does anybody have any questions on that from the board? All right, seeing none, we now come to our second opportunity for audience comments. Once again, anyone interested in addressing the board can access a link on our district website and submit a Google form. Kathy Kajigian will be reading the comments once again. The board will be in listening mode. We ask that everyone gather their thoughts and submit one comment per session. So Kathy, I look to you right now and ask you, are there any comments?
Yes, there are.
Can you just so I can anticipate, how many comments do you think we have?
We have 35.
All right, I'm looking at the clock. It's 10:25. I will say that I want to get through these comments, but I don't see much of a point of going past 11 o'clock because I'm not sure how functional any of us will be. So just be aware that at some point we might need to wrap up comments, and then will be submitted to the board. I believe we can see that in writing, and then you will get a comment at that point. So our usual practice is to limit comments to 3 minutes. I'm not sure if that's going to be possible reading comments, but we'll try to get through this as fast as possible. So Kathy, it's all yours.
Okay. The first is from Bonnie Kearns, a citizen without children connected to D34 schools. The CDC released updated guidelines last Thursday that they now strongly recommend in-person learning full-time. If D34 decides to not choose to do this, they are willingly going against the CDC guidelines and can no longer claim they are following major recommendations from this health agency. We are a virus that we are trying to run away from versus face for the majority of people under 65 that have over a 99% survival rate. The odds of a child under the age of 15 dying of COVID is 1 in 1.7 million. If a child does not suffer from a comorbidity, which a vast, vast majority don't, less than 1%, the chances of them dying of COVID is 1 out of 8.5 million. Additionally, studies from Sweden have shown that teachers have no excess risk compared to other professions. If you are not willing to go back to work, you will not get paid. Your contract is based off of face-to-face learning, not e-learning. The reason healthcare workers, grocery workers, restaurant delivery drivers showed up is because they have a family to support and need to get compensated. If you refuse to teach, you should agree to an ankle monitor to be worn, as you should not be allowed to do other activities where your risk of COVID is present. No vacations, dining out, or attending any events that would require you to have the same risk as showing up into a classroom to teach. Your pay should be reflected in the work both parties agree to do. Otherwise, taxpayers need to retract their tax bills and you cannot get paid. That's how the world works. Then from Patty Wolf, staff member, thank you to all involved in this decision. The focus on family wellness in the spring was excellent. Thank you for providing hotspots, lunches, supplies, and more to our families in need in order to choose to close the equity gap. I know this will continue no matter what decision is made, and I am grateful for that, and our families are too. Everyone will be proud of the rapid and thorough response to the needs of our community. Thank you. From Joanne Furlong, a staff member. While I would love to be back in the classroom as a classroom associate, I have a concern about quarantine. If a classroom I work in is quarantined, does that mean I will have to be quarantined? That means my husband will not be able to have the care assistance that he requires. Therefore, I am reluctantly requesting remote learning. From Matt Stubbe, parent of D34 students. Why can't we all make our own choice that fits each family and teacher best? If teachers don't feel safe, put them in charge of e-learning. If parents don't feel safe sending their kids, they can attend e-learning with those teachers. And the flip side is true. Have the teachers that take pride in their job and the most essential service of all, teaching classrooms, and the parents who feel safe sending them can go. My children attend camp every day from 9 to 3 and participate in Little League. I want nothing more to send them to school, but I also know that is what's best for our family, and I won't pretend to know what's best for you. However, having that choice is essential in being a parent member of our community. A one-size-fits-all approach does not make any sense for either teachers, parents, or students. Give us the options of how we wish our children to learn, and then the board can adjust class sizes based on parents selecting how they wish to learn. A question from Andrea Colaro, a parent. Will advanced math be available through the GOAL program? From Lori and Dan Ornstein, parents. We are parents of twins in the district's early childhood program, one of which has an EIP through the district. First, we want to thank Superintendent Deli and the whole school board for your commitment to transparency during this horrendous process, and for your commitment to our children and all of the children in the district. We recognize there are no easy answers, and any decision will be questioned and second-guessed with the benefit of hindsight. We also want to thank all the wonderful teachers, aides, and staff in the district. You are our heroes. All of that being said, we would like to take a moment to advocate for a hybrid system in the fall with a plan to return full-time when appropriate to do so. Our children started in the early childhood program last September. At that time, our daughter barely spoke, and when she did, it was a word or two. We are absolutely amazed with the transformation our daughter underwent in 6 short months, thanks in no small part to her absolutely falling in love with Mrs. Captain. She started off the school year as a scared baby and blossomed into a confident little girl in the span of just over a semester. I often wonder where she would be today if this terrible virus didn't cut the year short. She's a poster child for the benefit of hands-on, in-person instruction from amazing and dedicated staff. We understand the fears and concerns of the teachers and staff, and we also understand the needs of our families. We have argued both sides of this gut-wrenching decision countless times over the summer. We've come to believe that a hybrid system is the only one that truly addresses the needs and concerns from both sides. Students will be able to get their social and emotional needs addressed with part-time in-person instruction in a safe and socially distant environment. Teacher and staff safety needs will also be best addressed in the system, as they will be dealing with smaller class size and less time in the building while creating a bond with their students, which is simply not possible in a strictly virtual environment. We certainly understand the fears and concerns of the many teachers and staff. We believe, however, that this decision cannot be made solely with that in mind. The facts on the ground and the science must guide these decisions. We have every confidence in the amazing district to keep the staff and students as safe as possible. We'll continue this district regardless of the decision made. As with everything, we cannot focus on the art of the ideal. We must instead focus on the art of the possible. A hybrid system best does that. Thank you for your time and your service to our community. From Clara and Conrad Nowak, parents. First of all, thousands, literally, of parents cannot get into this meeting because of your Zoom limit of only 1,000 people. Is there a live stream? Second, school should resume as in CPS with an option for kids to do virtual and for others to attend in person as they wish. Our kids deserve this, and the educational, emotional, and psychological harm to the children unable to attend far outweighs other concerns where, as here, reasonable and CDC recommended guidance can be followed. We can protect our teachers as needed with plexiglass, etc. We need to think out of the box for our kids first. We love D34 and the kids do too. Let's work together and find a solution to bring them back. Thank you for all you do. From Steve Model, a parent. Where are the comments from the 70+% of parents that replied to your survey saying they will send kids back to school in person? Seems like you have selected only your worried staff comments. Teachers are essential public employees. Kids belong in school. from Lisa Walsh, a staff member. Please explain, how does capping the number of participants allow for all voices to be heard? From Kristen Elvikrad, a parent. Dear Board of Education, this is Kristen Elvikrad, proud parent of 2 daughters at a TIA school. Thank you for all you have done to contemplate how we can ensure the physical and mental health of students, staff, and community. I appreciate how much effort has gone into identifying options that best meet the needs of our community and our future, our children. We live in unprecedented times with new realities of what life looks like. It is unlikely that this new reality is going to change anytime soon. It's about how to live in this new reality. We now wear masks and socially distance in the supermarket, Target, hardware store, etc. This is our new normal, rules of accepted protective measures. I don't know of a single individual who refuses to shop for groceries, go to the hardware store, or purchase household items in person. Similarly, we can return to school with appropriate precautions. We know
Kathy,
appropriate precautions. Yeah.
can I just throw in one thing? The 1,000-person limit on Zoom is not us.
Yeah.
It's Zoom.
Right.
Zoom has a 1,000-person limit, and there is no option for a larger call. So there are good reasons why it's at 1,000. Although I think we would all love to have everybody who wanted to be on.
Thank you for sharing that, and we will share the recording of this meeting. And back to Kristen Elvikrad. We know appropriate precautions to take and can minimize, not eliminate risks. Unfortunately, we do not live in a mythical no-risk world, but we never had a no-risk world. Instead, we live in an imperfect world that we all must learn to navigate together. It's time to move forward. Education is an essential service is one. Our obligation is to provide the children in our community with an education that will prepare them to navigate this world and become productive members of society. Remote education can never replace in-person learning. If we felt remote education with limited instruction and interaction was adequate, we would not need teachers, but would just have children learn from their computer. But of course, our teachers are an integral and crucial part of educating our youth. It's because we value our teachers so greatly that I ask that we allow our teachers to do their good work and let our children learn and grow by attending school in person. Thank you to all who are working tirelessly to serve our children and our community. I implore you to put our children and their future first and let them come back to school in person. Thank you. From Becca Sobolewski, parent. I think you need to work on the teacher absentee issue. Most people would be fired if they missed that many days. I am unclear what the sub-issue is. You can rely on e-learning at home, but not in the class. How is this an issue? You are willing to have computers substitute at home. It appears all information is biased to protect the staff. Where are the advocates for children? From Mary Steiger, parent. It's my understanding that other districts in this area are doing some type of in-person learning. Wondering how they put together a plan that is safe for teachers and students and how we can follow their model. I am concerned that lack of in-person learning in any form will impact students' academics. From Robin Cohn, parent. What kind of accountability will be in place to ensure all teachers provide robust e-learning? I'm concerned about the slideshow that states start of day and end of day check-ins with children with Remote Plus. Students need more than check-ins. They need daily content instruction if all remote. What are teachers doing during the remote teaching day if they aren't doing live synchronous learning opportunities? Also, if hybrid, why aren't remote learners viewing and participating in the live in-person instruction via Zoom? Teachers should provide 5 days of instruction. From Carlos Quiroga, parent. Good evening. Thanks for all your hard work during this tough time. Could you please give more details about how our advanced and gifted program is going to work with a remote online option? Thank you and regards. Next, from Beth Nolte, staff member. If the district plans to use associates as teacher subs, have you considered the legal, educational, and social emotional ramifications of denying students with legally binding IEPs the necessary supports and valued education? Teachers are tired of their resources being pulled. Students are not achieving to their potential. We pull their supports, and parents should be irate when their child does not receive their legally binding supports. Using associates who support students with IEPs to substitute for absent teachers is not the answer and should not be tolerated. From Jill Weeks, a parent. Will GOAL be a synchronous online learning experience or only asynchronous, or both as the same amount as Remote Plus? Please give more specifics as the similarities and differences of Remote and GOAL Plus. From Jacqueline Brennan, parent. When lifeguards at Flick Pool tested positive, the pool was closed until contact tracing could be done. What is the plan for a student or teacher testing positive? Will we be notified of cases? I feel very uncomfortable sending my son to a TIA this fall. I was considering GOAL, but upon hearing that there are currently no staff or planning in place, I would be very hesitant to do this. From Cynthia Garcia, parent. If we start with Remote Plus to start the school year, who decides when we move to hybrid? Is this a D34 decision, or will it go to a vote by the Board of Ed? From Melissa Hogendorp, a staff member. Hello, my name is Melissa Hogendorp, and I'm an English language teacher at Henking School. I've been teaching in District 34 for 14 years. Thank you for all of your dedication and effort to make this difficult decision for our children and staff. It appears that district admin is not even considering a full-time remote option as a whole, as opposed to a special enrollment in the GOAL model. Is a full-time remote option possible should the COVID environment warrant? Why is this not being considered? Many surrounding districts in Illinois, COVID District 10, example, Arlington Heights 25, Buffalo Grove, Mount Prospect 57, are starting a full-time remote. What are Remote Plus expectations for staff member attendance? Will they be required to be in the building for all 5 days or 4 of 5 days? 4 of 5 days. Thank you again for your time. We don't have a name there. From Zara Sahargani, a parent. Again, please, e-learning. Don't have a last name there. From Michael McCarty, parent. Why weren't the results of the parent survey shared? Please address this in your FAQs. From Matt Brannon, parent. The continuum is a total fallacy. There's no roadmap to a world without COVID, no clarity around a vaccine, herd immunity, etc. There's universal acknowledgement that in-person education is better, and our board and superintendent have explicitly recommended a lesser option for our children. Why have neighboring communities come to different conclusions and guidelines in the same data? The decision made today has an irrevocable impact on our kids. Not a disappointment to end up with a Remote Plus. It's a complete abdication of duty to do what's best for our kids. You've decided remote learning is an alternative, but at the same time, you've decided that bouncing around to remote is not. Nobody has never produced an adequate e-learning platform, and your suggestion that it will work entirely without evidence. Again, you hear for our older, vulnerable neighbors, harm the future of the very people you're here to represent. Mr. Silverman's alone suggests we're using children as an experiment. That's obviously not okay. We're at the forefront of education for this community. Please remember that. From Mary Carlton, parent. Mary mentioned that there's a meeting on Wednesday for specialized services. Will parents be informed of the outcome of that meeting prior to us having to make a decision by August 3rd? Depending on what that will look like, it will help a parent decide which route to go. Just like the board has a difficult task voting on this topic tonight, I would hope that the board recognizes the nearly impossible task a parent has to try to teach academics as well as a physical, speech, and occupational therapist, along with overseeing other children in the home. Many children with special needs already have a difficult time doing any work at home after school. Performing all of these tasks were extremely difficult in the spring. What information is being used to have these kids back in school, and what happens when they are unable to social distance and wear PPE? Will they still be allowed back? From Ashley Hubner, parent. Throughout this and the last board meeting, the various plans have been discussed as if the board could only choose one plan that applies to all 3 grade levels. Why has there been no consideration of different plans for different grade levels, and particularly for kindergarten and first graders? There have been references to infection rates of children 10 years and older, but that wouldn't include kids in K2. Finally, throughout all of the discussions of the remote plans, there's been no detailed discussion of how remote learning will be implemented for 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. What plans have been considered and what plans have been developed for this very young age group? If the board doesn't know how those age groups will be taught remotely, how can the board vote on a plan that will apply across all these groups? Finally, I would echo the support and comments made by Katie Jones. From Michelle Folkman, parent, if starting in remote class, would you consider keeping students in the same class as teachers as last year to give our students a sense of connection from the start? From Megan Brannon, parent, you deliberately ignored all parent feedback and tried to dress it up as having access to better data than parents do. In effect, you are suggesting you know better than parents about the care of their own children. You all act as though you're doing us such a favor and care about safety when the survey gave you the answer. There's a remote option for people who don't feel comfortable. End of story. Let people who do feel comfortable send their children to school where kids need to be. Why did you guys send home the letter last year when attendance was below 90%? Because education is essential and you said kids need to be. Now you're saying the exact opposite. From Naomi Bailey, staff member, Diane, safety first is so important. Mike, safety is important. Thank you for doing that. Great point. Nothing is the same, that nothing is permanent. I know there was a question about why parents were surveyed, and I just want to say that as a parent, I think it is important to engage all invested members in a community. This is not limited to just staff, admin, board, but that provides limited data that is not equitable. Important to remember that we are always working toward full in-person instruction, and this is what parents, administrators, and teachers want. I want to see my children. District and the masking and distance is not always possible, especially in early childhood and for students with other identified needs. Busing does not provide for 6 feet. How do we trace and confirm information when siblings attend different programs and teachers teach in more than one building? Moving forward, is there clarity among those making decisions about how instruction and interactions take place in early childhood? Maintain social distance with a mask, wearing equipment, either way, it's not possible in early childhood. Clarity given about what are the expectations for special education. To Katie, have you considered the aspects that could be measurable and beneficial in remote plus or only wants of in-person learning? You discussed typical services, but typical services in an atypical time does not seem reasonable. Have you had the ability to discuss the impact of typical medical services that we should be getting with your doctors and hospitals? Have you considered the remote plus and how we could focus on the better aspects of it and how this could be measured? Don't you have a license? If so, would you consider to sign on in one of the subcategories and work in our building, floating around class after class, especially with students who do not have the ability to keep masks on and social distancing? From Carl Anderson, parents. Does Mike Corman have anything to say about involvement in starting chiefcovidkiller.com? This company will make money if COVID continues to be an issue in the community. Can we please confirm his company will not contract with the district? From Joshua Dar.
I'm just gonna weigh in on that one, Kathy. It would be illegal for me to do so no.
Okay. From Joshua Dar, parent. Why was this a yes or no vote when this was a 4-choice option? From Katie Peterson, parent, has District 34 looked into using outdoor spaces so that kids can go in person at least until it gets to for this option? From Mira Desai, parent, thank you for presenting different solutions. I wanted to know if we start in Remote Plus and after 5 weeks we're not continuing that route, would we be able to sign up for Goal? From parents of our Mary Lagone, parent, I appreciate everyone's hard work and dedication with making a decision about a plan for school. I'm a fellow educator and I know this is a very challenging decision. I myself am returning to in-person learning in the fall. I hope that the district will find some opportunities in the Remote Plus model for all students to meet their teachers and possibly some fellow students outdoors in a tent with social distancing, masks, etc. It will be challenging for most young students to feel connected to their teacher and fellow students when all the instruction is done online at the start of the year. I also hope that we are able to move to the hybrid model at some point during the school year. From Jana Tranis, parent, I need to be able to see this better. The board is entrusted by the taxpayers to educate our students. The board is tasked to spend the money in the best way possible. No one could ever pretend e-learning is comparable, let alone adequate. Fear and feelings should not be allowed to hold the public school system hostage. This is a public service and e-learning will inflict great harm on our young children. Please use objective criteria. Tonight was subjective. If education is important like I believe it is, we will work to find risk mitigation strategies. What exactly would have needed to happen to open? 2 meetings and I don't have any idea besides we both look at Johns Hopkins website. Open the schools and provide a free quality public education. From Nathan Lynch, parent, what is the point of these comments if you're not going to take them into account before your vote? You have one job here and that is to provide education to the community, and you have decided to punt on that because you're bureaucrats. Kids need to be in school. Do your job. What are working parents supposed to do now with only 2-3 weeks to hire someone? We somehow need to hire a homeschool teacher or nanny in the next couple of weeks. Can I get a property tax refund to help that? From Will Chapman, parent, and this is the last comment of the evening. To the community members who are upset about the decision that was made tonight, please keep in mind that the teachers are not the ones who made the decision when posting your concerns and frustrations in the various online parent groups. To the board, please consider using Google Meet live stream to increase capacity. Up to 100,000 viewers are capable of watching a single stream.
All right, Kathy, thank you for reading all of those comments. Clearly, they reflect the fact that we had a very difficult decision to make tonight when obviously knew that there was going to be groups of people who were going to be very unhappy with our decision. But we thank everybody for their input, and we will always listen to your comments and take them into consideration, and an appropriate response will come in a timely manner. All right, let's quickly get through the rest of our agenda. We have our reports section. We have 2 reports tonight, the FOIA report and the NSSCD board meeting report. Do any board members have any questions about either of those reports? Seeing none, we come to the last item on our agenda, and that is other business. Does any board member have any additional business to bring before the board tonight? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion and a second to adjourn tonight's meeting.
So moved. Jim Baumstark.
Second, John Egge.
This is a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. Good night.